Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
So a bit more tense, screamed midwife Lilia, in one of the wards of a luxury private clinic. All right, Sarah, take notes. 200. A young Sarah, a girl interning at this clinic, nervously wrote everything the woman said on a card. Victoria helped Lilia cut the umbilical cord and handed the baby to the mother. Nice work, Emma. As you name her, Victoria praised her laboring mother, who she had guided through the pregnancy from the beginning. Michael and I decided to name her after his grandmother, Sophia. Through tears, the girl spoke through her tears. She was happy that during all these months of pregnancy, Victoria had helped her both physically and mentally. Emma never once doubted her decision. Choosing this Mondefort clinic was indeed the best of the best in Canada. Although she had to pay a lot of money for it, the whole 9 months went comfortably, just like her labor. She looked at her baby for a long time, and finally looked up at Victoria, her midwife, to whom the girl was insanely grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. She received a genuine smile in return. Victoria was one of the best midwife doctors in Toronto. She had attended many conferences, meetings, competitions, and was indeed an experienced doctor. Therefore, she undoubtedly had clients. The girl worked in a private maternity hospital, the Ford Foundation, and she was actually paid good money. However, always when she was asked if she wanted to open her own clinic, she shook her head, arguing that there would be more financial worries than the work itself with the client. And she really loved her business, making sure the mother and newborn were okay. She left the room, leaving them to the care of specialists on behalf of experienced than her, but true professionals. Thanking everyone for their excellent work, she left the labor and delivery room and walked down the hallway towards her office. She was joined by another midwife who was carrying some papers in a brown folder. She was obviously overjoyed about something. Victoria watched her with a puzzled, smiling expression on her face. And yet I decided to ask what happened. But at last I thought you wouldn't ask. Testament girl with joy, and even jumped up like a child. I was approved, Vic. To Victoria at first did not realize what her colleague meant. However, remembering their dialogue a week ago, she immediately brightened up. What's true? You were finally allowed to adopt him. Yes, there were problems with the paperwork, but John helped me, and now we can't wait to be parents. Stella, congratulations. It took you this long. Finally, one more happy family. I'm so happy for you and John. I'm bursting with emotion. Stella decided to hug Victoria and thank her for being there for her when she made the decision. Stella had never wanted to give birth, reasoning that it would ruin her body, or the baby could be disabled. And despite the doctor's attempts to convince her that technology has long advanced and none of her fears would come true, she flatly refused to make her own child. And a month ago, the girl still decided to start a family and take a child from the orphanage. Together with her husband, John, she went through various adoption procedures. After all, this case is not simple and also has pitfalls. As long as the paperwork is formalized, as long as the couple passes all the medical examination. However, it took 3 weeks and she was finally approved for adoption. She had long ago found a boy she liked. The girl didn't want to do like most couples who wanted a smart and handsome child. She was only looking for a little man who would love her as much as she loved him. In none of the shelters, Stella found a boy from the age of 7 named Mark. She knew immediately that this boy would be like family to her, so she decided to adopt him by all means. I can pick Mark up tomorrow. I'm so happy, Vic, the girl said as they walked down the hospital corridor. What she saw, however, was not the same face that had been smiling at her a moment ago. Though Victoria pretended to be happy for her friend, her smile was strained and her gaze spoke of something else. The girl walking beside her was desperate, and it seemed to Stella that Victoria was about to cry. The girl slowed her step, and Vicky automatically did the same, and then they stopped right in the middle of the hallway. The girl put her hand on her friend's shoulder. Vic, I didn't share the news at the wrong time, gently asked Stella. Victoria turned to her colleague and, already not hiding her tears, answered, no, it's okay, really. It's just that you are so happy. And everyone around me, friends, colleagues, customers, and I feel so lonely. Stella's sweet reply was all Stella could manage, and she wrapped her friend in a tight hug. She realized that her friend still couldn't accept the fact that she was infertile. After all, unlike her, who could afford children but didn't want to give birth, Victoria was incapable of doing so. Vicky often told her about her worries about her problem. However, Stella could only comfort her with the fact that she could take a child from an orphanage. And Victoria really thought about it. However, until now she had not taken any drastic action. After all, she didn't just want a child, she wanted a family. Victoria gently pushed Stella away and climbed out of that tight embrace, brushing away another tear. She again put on the mask of an imperious and strong woman, on which at first glance, you could not tell that she could be so vulnerable. I'm sorry for these emotions. I'm really happy for you, friend. Please don't think I'm jealous or anything. I understand you, Vike, and I'm sure you'll find your happiness. You just don't give up. The girl smiled in return. Her friend rarely called her Vicky. After all, in this abbreviation was something native. It was exactly what her mother called her. Stella decided to leave the girl alone with her thoughts and left under the pretext that she was already expected with the documents. Victoria, on the other hand, continued on her way. Back in her office, Victoria's mind was in a state of reflection. It was true that she supported her friend and was not averse to having children herself. However, the only and most important thing that distinguished her strength from her friend had a loving husband, what Victoria couldn't boast of. It had always been a problem for her. She had a completely unassuming appearance. She was even a little repulsive. However, the girl corrected the situation with her good character and cheerfulness. Victoria looked at herself in the mirror. Curly, red hair, crooked nose with asymmetrical eyebrows. Everything she saw in her reflection, she didn't like. And that was indeed a huge, heavy burden that had accompanied Victoria all her life. After all, no matter what anyone says, appearance plays a paramount role. You look at the cover, and then see you through the mind. Because of that fact, she could never find a man. They'd all run out of dates. The last one didn't even make up an excuse to leave. He just got up and walked out. Of course, if it were possible, as in a game, to show all her excellent qualities and properties, Victoria would not be equal. However, she doesn't live in a simulation, but in the real world, where your soul will only be considered when you attract them with your looks. A knock on the door brought her out of her musings. Emma, who had given birth to a baby girl a few hours ago, came in. She was holding a beautiful package, and Vicky immediately guessed that it was a gift for her labor. But at least somewhere she was truly loved and appreciated. There's our mommy. Victoria happily greeted the girl as she left the table. She wrapped her ward in a as tight an embrace as possible. It was not long after the birth, but her patient was already on her feet. What couldn't the other moms boast? Usually they took a long rest. But Emma was a brave and fighting girl. You're out of bed early. Darling, said the midwife. Oh, I'm not tired. Victoria, thanks to you. The birth was so comfortable that I already want to take my baby girl and walk with her. I am so grateful to you for the kindness and care you have given me during the whole 9 months. The girl took out a bag and handed it to her doctor. Victoria began to scrutinize its contents. I decided to buy you some useful oils and cosmetics. I would like to point out that they are of excellent quality. You know me, I don't skimp on my health, Emma said, smiling. Victoria was getting angry with paint. On her face could be seen even a slight surprise. Her clients often gave her gifts. Emma, however, was special. On the day she had sought help because she couldn't conceive a child, Victoria had been on duty. Of course, she was already a trained professional. However, there were too many women in labor that month, and all the midwives had their hands full. and Emma couldn't catch Victoria, who had been recommended to her by a friend, calling her the best, because the midwife just didn't have time for her. Certainly the girl was quite wealthy and could allow herself any other private clinic. However, she wanted to give birth here, since she herself was born in this very maternity hospital. But still Victoria was able to spare an hour to her visitor, who went to the hospital every day, hoping to find a doctor. "Do you sit in our ward all day long? I take it you are really serious, my dear," Victoria asked the young girl. "Please help me. I want to give birth in this hospital." "Yes, I know. That's why you came to me. I was told you've been unable to conceive for a year." "Yes, please help me. I'll spare no expense. I was assured that you can help," the girl pleaded, almost crying. Victoria looked at her sternly. Then she looked at the documents again, correcting her glasses. "Emma," so the midwife said thoughtfully, then nodded an appraising glance at the poor girl. "I don't care about the size of your wallet. I'll do my best. You follow my orders, and you'll have a chance." "Thank you. God sent you." "Thank you, Victoria," Emma screamed. Memories flooded into Victoria's mind. The first ultrasound results, the long-awaited pregnancy. She was infertile, but she knew how to help the poor who longed for family happiness just as she did. That was the love of her work, her outlet. Victoria saved those who had the slightest chance of success, and she always succeeded, sometimes with great difficulty. But she never gave up and eventually became the first doctor in Toronto who could cure infertility. She was talked about in newspapers, on television, in commercials. She was invited to all sorts of foundation events, to shootings, and almost no one she did not refuse, because she knew one truth, which once her mother told her: "If you can help, help. Do not wait for a miracle. You are the miracle." Victoria was so moved by all these thoughts that she let a tear fall. What Emma couldn't help but notice: "Victoria, what are you doing? Please don't cry." "If you didn't like the gift," I stopped the touch of the doctor's hand on the girl. "Emma, thank you for giving me a chance to feel wanted again." Through tears, said midwife. Young mother awkwardly smiled and gave herself permission to feel this moment and wept. "You are an inspiration to many, Victoria. I hope you too can find your happiness. I will miss you," said the girl. And with these warm words left the office. Victoria was alone again. Today's day turned out to be too sad. What the girl did not expect. But having collected herself, she went to the desk where the computer stood and completely went to work. It really helped her to take her mind off her problems. After 2 o'clock of continuous work, the girl noticed a notification in the corner of the screen. Clicking on it, she was taken to her email. She had received an email from a medical association of doctors stating that it was recommended that she take a refresher course. Victoria wasn't surprised by this. Even though she was one of the best obstetricians in town, she often took similar courses. Since technology and knowledge do not stand still, and to stay in the top all the time, you need to keep your theoretical and practical knowledge in shape. So she happily replied to this email saying that she would definitely attend. They were to take place every 24 hours in the evening, starting tomorrow for 24 days. And this schedule suited Victoria quite well, for she was always looking for something to do in the evening, besides going out with her friends, of whom she had many. However, socializing with them made her very tired. Most of them already had children. Half of her friends were born in her own clinic where she works. And of course, all the talk was mostly about their glorious years, which drove Victoria into depression and even more enrollment. The midwife continued her laborious work at the computer, which consisted of filling out various papers. Victoria hated these formalities, as she liked to do other, more useful things rather than filling out new documents like an accountant in an office. However, these formalities had to be observed, and the girl had no choice but to obey them. Her hard and hateful work was again interrupted by a knock at the door. This time a nurse came in, bringing new cards and about the patients. Vicky at first didn't even notice her arrival. But when the young intern was about to leave, opening the door, the midwife stopped her. "Can't I fulfill one request of mine?" Victoria asked politely. The girl turned and looked puzzled at the doctor. Please make a note at the reception desk that I will be absent every evening for a month. By order of the head doctor of the department. All the documents will throw you to the mail, said Victoria, smiling sleepily at her, looked at her with a look as if she was doing a favor, and walked out. Victoria ignored that look from the nurse. They do get tired in practice. When Vike was in higher education, she too suffered from not having enough to eat, and she could barely do simple tasks, not to mention the fact that she had to smile. Unfortunately, studying to be a doctor is hard. And of course, smiling would not save the situation. So the girl understandably escorted Mew with her eyes until tomorrow. Miss Wilson, shouted to her the doctor on duty, who remained on duty for the night, while the midwife passed by and went to the elevator. The girl was really tired, and her last words had not pleased Miss at all. Even though Vika was only 30 years old, she felt that she would never be a Mrs. She would never have another last name. She would. It would always be lonely. With these thoughts, she got into a cab and drove home. Her apartment was located in Harbourfront. In Toronto's Central District, she had a swanky apartment with a view of the entire city. Vicky liked to often go out with a cup of cocoa on the balcony and look at the lights of the city at night. "Mom is home," shouted Victoria, closing the front door behind her. Her Cavalier King Charles Spaniel dog immediately came running to her. Quite an expensive pet. However, Vicky didn't feel sorry for the money for the creature that was replacing her friend, husband, and child. "I'm sorry it took so long, my boy was hungry," probably asked Victoria a rhetorical question. But unfortunately, instead of a human answer, received only a proud woof. "Let's go, my joy," said the girl, and with these words led her puppy to the kitchen. Turning on the light, she looked for food for her pet, and to her surprise, found it poured into the food for Arson, who looked at the bowl of food with greedy eyes. She opened a bottle of expensive wine, poured it into a glass, and went to her favorite balcony. This view, which she watched almost every night, could not be described in 2 words. At the very top of the skyscraper, she could not hear the noise of the cars, yet she could watch them moving along the highway. She could see lights in almost every window. Life was boiling before her eyes, and she was not dying of loneliness again. She enjoyed it and was proud of the life she was living, albeit alone. Her train of thought was interrupted by the barking of the doggy, who always did that when the phone rang, who could need her at 0 o'clock. The doctor's work never ends, so the girl still went to the phone. "Victoria Wilson speaking," she answered. "Hello, Ms. Wilson. I apologize for the late call. I need to confirm your enrollment in the course." Victoria, I was beginning to get annoyed. She hated getting calls at this hour, especially for a formality. However, after realizing that the consultant on the other end of the line was not to blame for this and was just doing her job, she answered, "Yes, I confirm that I will be present from tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye." But Victoria hung up. She was really annoyed by that phone call. Why couldn't she have called in the morning? She fell asleep with this mood. Entering the auditorium, Victoria saw quite a few people. Were they all gynecologists and midwives? She took an empty seat with another girl. Vika didn't really look at her neighbor, but managed to notice her beautiful dark hair tied in a ponytail. She was dressed quite openly. She was wearing a tank top and jeans. However, this bow was quite appropriate for the place. For the next hour, there was a sepulchral silence in the auditorium. Everyone listened attentively to the speaker, who looked no more than 35 years old. That will be the end of our discussion today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for coming. The speaker said goodbye to the doctors. Everyone quickly began to gather. There was a ruckus. Taking all the supplies in the bag, Vicky side-eye noticed the sight of a neighbor and turned in her direction. "They woke you up at 12 o'clock last night too?" The neighbor asked with a smile. "Yes, and I thought I was the only lucky one," Victoria said tediously. After yesterday, she didn't want to smile at all and walked like a zombie all day. Is that why you're in a bad mood too? The perky brunette didn't stop and answered Vika in the same tone, and already wanted to get up and leave. However, she was stopped by a feeling of regret. She rude neighbor on the first day of their acquaintance. Perhaps they will sit together for a month, so she did not want to spoil the relationship. I'm sorry. It had been a rough day. They had to do 2 mom's C-sections, and it was hard to control the process. First time doing a C-section. Victoria was confused by the question. Did the girl doubt her qualifications? She probably just misunderstood her. Oh, just kidding. Don't worry about it. I get tired of my job every time. I take it you're a midwife. Yes, Vika answered with interest. And you're a gynecologist for teenagers. You don't know how hard it is with them. I love children, but they are so shy. Every time I have to pull out of them words, as if obstetrician them with forceps. Still with a smile, the neighbor said, "Oh, I didn't even introduce myself." Samantha Brown introduced herself and raised her hand for a handshake. Victoria Wilson is an obstetrician gynecologist, responded to the girl's handshake, as Samantha formally mouthed her name, laughing. The girls exchanged phone numbers and said goodbye, agreeing to sit next to each other, and tomorrow, the new day passed unnoticed. Victoria didn't do anything special at work. Mostly she fiddled with documents and filled them out. The girl was very much looking forward to meeting her new acquaintance, Samantha. Therefore, as soon as the clock showed 7 o'clock, Vicky immediately closed the laptop and closed the office, rushed to the courses. They were held not far from the maternity hospital where she worked. She only had to walk 1 block. But unfortunately, it started to rain heavily, and Vicky had nothing to cover herself with. However, before she could walk a couple of meters, an umbrella suddenly formed over her head, followed by the person holding the umbrella. It was Samantha. Victoria marveled at her sudden appearance. How did she end up here? Victoria wondered. I work nearby in that hospital over there, the girl said. She pointed to the northeast. So that's the neighboring building of the clinic where I work. So we're not just desk neighbors, said the girl with a wink, to which she got the same smirk in return. Victoria was still surprised that they had been working next to each other all this time and had never met once. She was enjoying this girl's company more and more. After the seminar, her new friend suggested going to a cafe. After all, tomorrow was already Sunday. Of course, the job of a teenage gynecologist was easier than that of a doctor of midwifery. They had the weekend off, unlike Victoria. However, Vicky accepted the invitation because there were no grand plans for Sunday, no labor and delivery surgery, or meeting a new client. All she had to do was fill out paperwork on the computer over and over again, which she absolutely did not want to do. And a cup of coffee with a friend was the perfect excuse to take the day off. Hi, Vicky said hello, sitting down at the table across from her friend. How long have you been waiting for me? She asked, noticing half-drunk and a cup of coffee. Hi, darling. I wasn't particularly thirsty, and the drink had already been served. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, Victoria said with a smile. In the beginning, the dialogue was not at all formed, and it was very awkward. The girls discussed work, the weather, and each other's well-being. However, the conversation became more sincere when the conversation turned to the topic of family. But Vicky suspected that someday their chatter would reach this sensitive topic, so she was prepared for this outcome. So what did we find out? That you like kids. In a good way, Samantha joked, making their time together more relaxed. And you have kids of your own. Or maybe you're planning to. Victoria decided not to rush her answer. She slowly raised the coffee mug to her lips and took a sip, trying to ignore Samantha's eager gaze. There are no children. More accurately muled, the girl said. I'm infertile. That's why I can't even think about having a family. Firmly, she said. She saw Samantha's look of dying embarrassment. However, her friend immediately corrected herself. What about the kids from the orphanage? Or have you always dreamed only of your own children? Are you afraid you won't love them as much as you would if you had your own? I thought about it, but I can't bring them up alone. I can't cope. And my personal life has been a little strained so far too. Oh, come on. You can do it on your own. I haven't seen my husband in 2 months. He's on a ship that sails around the Japanese islands. And when we see each other, we don't see each other much either. I've got work. He's got things to do. So I do all the household chores myself. And we have 3 dogs. Of course, I understand that they cannot be compared with children. But children, although you will be there at 6 o'clock, but not often ask you to go for a walk with them right away. Otherwise, they wet the hallway or slippers, Samantha said, laughing. So all the care of these little creatures rests on my fragile female shoulders, summarized the girl, taking another sip of fresh emergency coffee. Do you have pets too? Victoria answered enthusiastically. I have a puppy, and he's always asking to go for walks. Samantha, I suggest we walk our pets together. That's a great idea. Vic, where do you live again? Harbor Front, Harbor Point. So you're right downtown. Good for you. My husband and I would need at least 5 years to get a small mortgage on a small apartment. However, I do live close to you. Do you know Young Street? Sure. I walk in the park, and I come out on that street. That's the park. Victoria, we definitely found each other. And from that meeting, the girls bonded. Samantha was only 2 years younger than Victoria, so they didn't feel any age difference. The girls became the closest of friends and did almost everything together. They left work, walked their pets, and often went to visit each other. Once they baked cookies together, which burned, and they laughed about the story for a long time. And Victoria was happier than ever. She used to think she had tons of friends until she met Samantha. She was someone with whom you could share all your problems, knowing that you wouldn't be judged, understood, and supported. In turn, Vicky listened attentively to her friend's worries about her relationship. It turns out that the girl was always worried about the distance between her and her husband, and although almost always managed to hide it, the mask could not be worn forever, and the girl snapped. Since childhood, she dreamed of a family and a cozy home full of love. However, when her husband was sent to serve in the East, their lives changed dramatically. All of Alexander's promises that they would always be in touch turned to dust. He found himself more and more occupied with his work and less thinking about his wife, who had waited obediently for him for the 2 years they had been married. It was killing him. Samantha was pushing her from the inside out. Though she didn't show it, she felt bad, and Victoria tried with all her might to distract the girl from her unsightly plight. And she was succeeding. Until one unfortunate day that broke Samantha. Nothing unusual had happened that day. Both girls were doing their work, and in the evening they planned to go for a walk, walking down the streets and flying ice cream. They were making plans for tomorrow. However, their fun conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Samantha picked up the phone and moved a little away from her friend, holding her ice cream in her hands with a smile. The girl answered it. She didn't utter a word further. However, by her facial expression, which was gloomier and gloomier with every second, Victoria realized something was wrong. She didn't dare to approach her friend until she dropped the ice cream cone and then collapsed on the pavement. Victoria ran over, snatched the phone from her, which her friend was barely holding, and squatted down in front of her. Samantha didn't even lift her head when Vika took matters into her own hands and forced her friend to look at her, cupping her cheeks with her hands. It was a look she remembered for a long time. The completely glassy look of a devastated person. It was as if her friend was looking through her. Suddenly, the girl's eyes ran out, and she lost consciousness. Victoria barely had time to pick the girl up before her head collided with the hot sidewalk. It was only now that the midwife noticed that a circle of people had formed around them, as if it was some kind of show. "There are men here to help me." She turned to the crowd. Only one man came out to answer her question, a boy in his 20s. Pretty pumped up, though, and that could easily be seen in his muscular build, highlighting, rushing underneath a snow-white t-shirt. Pick her up and help me carry her to the car." "I'll call a cab now," the girl explained. The guy followed her instructions, and in 5 minutes Victoria was already riding in the car, and on her lap lay a friend, still unconscious. Vicky couldn't understand what it was that had shaken her so much. She was lost in speculation, but convinced herself that it was necessary to give her friend first aid, and then think about the causes of this terrible condition. The girl gave the cab driver her address and asked him to help her lift her friend to her floor. The cab driver was begging, but for an additional fee agreed. "But she's a Ms. Pinchuk too. Watch your girlfriend more carefully," the cab driver remarked as he led the girl up to the apartment. Victoria had no choice but to make a strained smile that screamed, "Get lost." The cab driver seemed to take the hint and departed, wishing the girl good night. Victoria, on the other hand, barely dragged her friend to the bed, and as soon as she put her to bed, she collapsed next to her. It turns out that to carry a drunken person, you need a good physical preparation. However, the girl lay only a few minutes, during which she gave herself a break before a new difficult task. "I had to at least get Samantha out of her jeans and get her comfortable. I pulled off my friend's shoes and jeans." The girl put her head on a soft pillow and covered her with a blanket, and then lay down next to her. The next morning, Victoria woke up with a terrible headache. She opened her phone and saw 30 missed calls from Lily, her fellow midwife. It was then that the girl realized how badly she had blundered. Plans had completely slipped her mind. Today, she had to be present at the hospital as early as 7 o'clock because Maria was going to come to them, who was going to give birth the other day, or rather to lie under the surgical knife, because she was going to have a C-section. Vika looked at the clock, which showed 11 o'clock in the afternoon. The horror. She might be fired. The girl got up in a flash and ran to the kitchen, where she saw Samantha sitting at the table. Her eyes were still staring into the void. She didn't even seem to notice her friend's presence. Samantha cautiously called out to the girl Victoria. Her friend turned around. The midwife again saw that same glassy stare of the shattered man. She decided to take a seat at the table and gently inquire what had happened. She was no longer worried about her job or the fact that she might get fired. Right now, she was only thinking about her condition and her friend who clearly needed help. The silence lasted a minute, and only Victoria was about to say something. Samantha gave it away. "He's dead." Quietly, almost in a whisper, the girl said, "My husband, he's dead." Victoria was stunned by this news. Her eyes rounded and her breathing became very heavy. She realized why her friend looked like a corpse. Alexander had died. Those words like a bullet van get into Victoria over and over again. He was the only person who, though far away, mentally supported Samantha. She clung to him like a lifeline. He was very close to her, and the only person who truly loved her deeply and for a long time. And not even distance could break their soul connection. "Samantha, I'm so sorry." But her friend didn't seem to be listening to Victoria at all. "I feel sick." Suddenly, the girl blurted out and rushed to the bathroom. Victoria heard the sounds of vomiting. This news really hit her hard. Tonight she had fainted. Today she threw up. The midwife realized that she was now responsible for her friend's condition, both physically and mentally. "I'm sorry, it's very embarrassing. I in your apartment," began to apologize girl, returning to the table on the move, rubbing her chin, which she washed with water. "Nothing." Victoria nodded understandingly. She felt sorry for the girl, but she was a midwife, not a psychologist, and didn't know what was best to say in situations like this. She didn't want to hurt or make it any worse, so breakfast passed in silence. When Samantha got ready, all in the same silence, Victoria stopped her in the hallway. "You don't want to talk right now, I understand. However, remember that you can always turn to me for support. I'm here for you." "Thank you, Vika. You're my only comfort. I love you," the girl replied, hugged her friend and left the apartment, leaving behind her the condensed smell of her favorite perfume. "Where have you been?" shouted Lily, all the time catching up with Victoria, as she was walking very fast, almost running. I'm not going to discuss this with you. Lily, I'm drawing the whole situation to the head doctor. If you want, you can eavesdrop outside the door. Just be careful, or the adults might scold you. Victoria answered wryly. She had never liked Lilia as a person. She was very slippery and dodgy and cunning, and she was always eager to listen to gossip or to start a ridiculous rumor herself. The midwife didn't trust her with any secret or news, because in an hour the whole hospital, or even worse, the whole neighborhood, would know about it. You've been rougher than usual today. I'm prepared to be rude to you. Always, my dear, but not in front of my clients, Victoria said, pointing to several girls who were sitting in the waiting room waiting for their paperwork to be done at the front desk. Very soon, they won't be yours anymore, Vic, the girl said meaningfully and walked away in the opposite direction. Lilia and Victoria had always been work rivals. They were both doctors of the highest category of obstetrician. However, Lilia differed in that she mostly delivered babies. Whatever Victoria did, who was a step higher and only supervised everyone in a separate ward. And about them, there were always disputes, who was the best and who really should be in charge in the maternity ward. And so Victoria had punctured herself and the clients were served by Lily, which Vike was not at all happy about. She was furious. She was afraid she was really going to lose her place. However, that morning, no matter how it was, circumstances demanded that she did not show up for work at the proper time. The girl simply couldn't leave her friend alone. Her conscience would have tormented her. For now, however, Samantha had the excuse of absence from work. Victoria did not have one, and in her heart she hoped that the head doctor took pity on her and would understand the situation. So you missed your work shift without answering the phone or even notifying your superiors to support your friend. Yes, ma'am, that's exactly how Victoria responded. Are we in kindergarten? Raised her voice the head of the department. Madam, I am a qualified specialist. And so you think that now you can come to work whenever you want. There was silence in the office. Victoria did not know what to answer such a nasty question. Victoria started as a doctor. I will not fire you, however. I have to punish you. You will lose all the female clients who wanted to sign up with you this month, and you must also pay a fine of $50,000. The midwife was shocked at the turn of events. She'll pay the money. It had never been a problem for her, but that's not what bothered her. She resented being humiliated for one mistake. She would rather be fired than have the girls she really wanted to work with taken away. She wondered who would serve her customers in this case, to which she received Lily's cruel and annoying answer. She has the same qualifications as you, so she could very well be promoted to the role of Dr. Midwife. Are you saying you understand me? Yes, Victoria, I understand. Our clinic needs doctors who are punctual and responsible, and if everyone does what you do, our hospital won't be considered one of the best in Toronto. But I've only missed work once. So why the cruel punishment? Doesn't 10 years of continuous service count for something? I don't want to talk to you like a schoolgirl, Victoria. And that's exactly what you're doing right now, unless you want to make things worse. Accept these new conditions and live in peace. Victoria once again gave the head doctor an indignant look. She couldn't even imagine that such a minor slip would remove her from her position as the leading obstetrician doctor, the position she had worked in for the past 5 years. As she walked out of the office, the girl saw Lily standing on the right side of the door. Apparently, the advice to eavesdrop on the conversation this girl had taken literally. And only then did Victoria realize that Lily must have already known everything. After all, who else but her had ratted out to the head doctor of the department that the employee wasn't at work? It was dishonest, mean, and nasty. But there was nothing the midwife could do about it. And, ignoring Lily's defeated looks, she merged into her office. In the evening, Vike tried to call herself, but her friend did not pick up the phone. And the girl concluded that the last thing Sam wanted to hear was platitudes about how everything would be fine and everything would work out. The girl hoped that her friend was fine, and she just turned off her phone. However, the anxiety did not go anywhere, but still Victoria decided to go to bed. The next working day surprised the girl even more. To be more precise, she was impressed by her friend's courage. "Victoria, you are our host again, Dr. Obstetrician, but please do not be late for work, and do not bother me for nothing." Quickly, the head doctor prepared the apparatus. Barely opening the door of Victoria's office, the girl didn't even see her face. Of course, she was amazed and delighted by this news, and in a minute she was already running around the department, trying to find answers. "Why?" she asked loudly, peering into the head doctor's office. "Why did you change your mind?" When the door opened fully, the girl saw someone she absolutely did not expect to see in this building. It was Samantha. Her friend smiled at her and got up from her chair. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm glad we understood each other." And the girl walked towards the exit of the office, towards the shocked and Victoria. "Why did you do that?" asked Victoria. As they walked down the hall, "You helped me, and after hearing about your problem, I decided to return the favor. We went to school together. You didn't know. She owed me something." Samantha smiled slyly. The girls entered Vicky's office. Vicky settled into the desk, and Samantha nestled us into the client chair. "But that wasn't my goal from the beginning," her friend continued. "I came to the hospital to give you some news, but I overheard from the staff that you'd been demoted, so I decided to find out why. And as you can see, it was not in vain." Victoria seemed to have missed the whole rant. What news? There was silence in the office. It was obvious that Samantha was gathering her courage to announce something very important. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to the hospital during working hours and in this condition. "I'm pregnant, Vicky." Victoria glanced at her friend and sank further into the chair. So it pitifully scripted the pool. She had expected everything. That Alexander had survived or Samantha had been informed where to pick up his body. However, this took her by surprise. She couldn't have even imagined such an outcome. And of course, she felt even more sympathy for Samantha, who had so many problems dumped on her in an instant. She wanted to hug the girl, to support her. However, she only said it aloud. "What's the time limit?" 2 months. Samantha said. "I haven't seen Alexander for exactly 2 months." As if anticipating the next question, the girl added, "I mean, yes, it's his child. But I'm not here to listen to tearful speeches and sympathy for my loss." Victoria quietly sighed in relief. She really wanted to support her friend. However, now, after so many events, the girl could only listen to her. "I came here," Samantha continued, "to ask you to be my doctor. I want you to manage the pregnancy from start to finish." However, seeing Victoria's eyes, which were rounding more and more with every second, the pal added, "You're my friend, and I'll be quiet." Vika stopped her. She went to her friend, hugged her tightly, and allowed herself to let a tear fall. "I'll do anything for you, Samantha." 2 months passed. The girls grew even closer. Victoria helped herself as much as she could. An ultrasound revealed that Samantha was expecting twins. Finally, it was time to find out the sex of the babies. Victoria offered her friends to make a gender party where they would find out in a solemn atmosphere. Samantha, however, refused. She still couldn't accept her husband's death. She didn't want to have any celebrations without him. They had planned to do everything together, but their whole life had collapsed in an instant, and the girl couldn't afford to party without him just yet. And of course, this holiday was unlikely to end in bright, hearty laughter. Samantha had frequent breakdowns, and she wouldn't be able to contain herself after finding out the sex of her babies. "Okay, you're all set. You can lie down." The midwife invited Samantha onto the couch. She smeared the girl's belly with special helium and began to drive the probe at the same time. Looking at the screen where the picture was coming up, "Are you ready, Sam?" Victoria asked. Her friend looked at her joyfully. However, in that look there was not only happiness, but also the bitterness of the loss of the treaty. "Not a shadow. You have twin boys." "Boys." Samantha screamed with happiness and asked her friend to print out their pictures. She was out of her mind. Joy overwhelmed her. It truly was a miracle. Months went by. Each day brought the incredible joy of impending motherhood. Victoria helped the girl set up the baby's room. They bought a crib and many different accessories. Vicky even helped her friend with money. And finally, the day of labor came. Okay, I'll say it again. Contractions are normal. Your water broke, and they're taking you to a private room, Victoria told her friend, as she was wheeled down the hall on a couch with wheels. Push, push, shouted midwife Lily, pulling out the first and then the second baby. Finally, Samantha was relieved. Victoria picked up the twins and placed them on her mother's chest. After what seemed like a minute, however, the machine abruptly replaced. All the doctors in the room fussed. Her blood pressure is dropping, shouted excited voices. She's lost too much blood. Give me the medication. Sarah, there was panic. In this chaos, Samantha tugged Valerie, who had been by Vicky's side the whole time, by the forearm. I'm losing consciousness. Please, under no circumstances, give them to my parents. Promise me that you will take care of them, please. I beg you, don't give them to my parents. You don't know what they're like. Victoria was horrified by what was happening. She'd never had a patient die before. And now why? Why did it have to be her only friend? But that wasn't what was required of her right now. And Victoria, though she was ready to panic, gathered all her will into a fist and answered with a firm grip on her friend's palm. I promise they'll be in good hands. As soon as Vicky uttered that short phrase, Samantha cut her off, rushed to pump, and carried the twins to safety. Heartbeat. The rhythm is weak, but steady. Looks like she's slipped into a coma. Lily's fait accompli was brutally stated. A month passed. Samantha was still in a coma. All the while, Victoria felt devastated. She went to work like a zombie. She came back from it in exactly the same condition. 2 weeks ago, however, she had an idea. It was crazy and terrifying, and Victoria had little faith in the success of this operation. However, she was willing to commit for her friend. She looks like a baby. Yes, it was certainly a crime. But the girl simply saw no other way out. Victoria quickly found buyers for 2 apartments, which she had her own and inherited from her mother, and at a very similar price. On the night of April 5, when it was exactly 1 month since the birth of the kids, the girl began to take active steps. To begin with, Victoria stayed at work at night, substituting someone who turned up by the way. This time was enough for her to find birth certificates and forged documents. She put her name in the mother's column, and she was able to do it because she had access to the documentation. And even here, Samantha helped her. After all, if her friend hadn't persuaded the head doctor to leave Vika's position as a physician midwife, she wouldn't be as omnipotent as she was now. She was in charge of all the baby-related paperwork that saw the light of day at this clinic, and that played to her advantage. The guards' guests had coffee with Irish liquor, which was very tasty. However, with a strong sleeping pill, the girl was able to free herself for a few hours by swiping her card on the electronic lock that closed the doors leading to the room with an oxygen box. She entered the room and looked for the children who were signed as Samantha Brown. Once she found them, she carefully dressed each sleeping baby, covered their faces with oxygen masks, and placed them in the double stroller. Now she was left with the single most difficult task of the night: to get out of the hospital. She had no hope of going completely unnoticed. She only prayed to God that the guard at the main entrance would notice her a minute later, when she could get into a cab. And he did, walking with a smirk. The guard at the building's exit asked. The girl answered with a hesitant nod and left the hospital as quickly as possible. As Victoria had expected, the guard stirred up the whole place later. While she was getting into a cab, the big man jumped out of the building and ran towards her, shouting, "You don't have children." "Victoria, stop. What are you doing?" But Vika ignored the screams. She was driven by excitement. She had it all worked out, but that was only the beginning of the plan. Now, while the sleepy cab driver took the girl to the place where her car was waiting for them, Victoria's main goal was to get away quickly and quietly so that the police and the others would wake up. already later, paying the cab driver twice as much, hoping that he wouldn't blab about the incident, which was unlikely because he didn't seem to care about anything. Victoria escorted the car out with a glance and made sure the man was gone. She opened the lane that her BMW had covered. Her faithful dog Aaron was already waiting there. And the twins were still sleeping peacefully as well. No amount of chasing could wake them up, it seemed, carefully putting them in the already prepared sleeping places. Victoria got behind the wheel. Beside her sat her pet. They looked like a gang from a gangster movie. The partner, of course, was Aaron, laughing a little at their thought. The girl backed up, turned around, and drove down the highway, picking up speed with each passing second. Her path lay to the airport. Standing at the checkpoint, the girl was very nervous. However, she was reassured by the fact that she looked like the truest mother. "So they are a month old?" the customs official asked sternly. "Yes, sir," replied Victoria. The girl did not give any further comments, afraid to say anything unnecessary. "And for what purpose are you going to Istanbul?" "My friend and I had an agreement that when my babies are a month old, I will visit her in Istanbul to show her my younger ones. I mean, a visit to a friend." The officer made a disgruntled grimace. However, when he looked at the documents, a faint smile appeared on his face. "Have a good trip, Mrs. Wilson." The girl gave him a smile. And as soon as she crossed the line, she exhaled a sigh of relief. He called her Mrs. A new one was beginning. The head in her life is happy, much happier than before, and she's ready for this change. "So, kids, this is our new apartment for the next 18 years, declared Vika when she was finally given the keys to the apartment. The property Victoria had purchased here was very spacious. 4 bedrooms, a huge kitchen adjacent to the living room, and of course, a panoramic view of Istanbul. Another window on the opposite side of the apartment overlooked the Bosphorus Strait. She had chosen this city for many reasons. First, this country needed highly skilled doctors. Secondly, the warm climate that Victoria loved so much was excellent here. Well, of course, and Istanbul, as the locals called it, was a very cozy and colorful city, which also added its own special charm by putting the children in the pre-prepared cribs, which she had asked to be placed in the nursery before she arrived. She turned on the TV and sat down on the couch as she suspected she would. The news channels were already buzzing about the stolen twins. It had been exactly 24 hours since her successful abduction. Given the time zones, and while everyone in Toronto was just waking up and listening to the horrifying news, Victoria was drinking delicious tea in her new apartment, and the bright afternoon sun was shining outside the window. "What, Sharon? It's about time we had a makeover," the girl said triumphantly. Of course, the change of appearance is not a quick thing. That's why Victoria only shaved off her long, thick hair and made herself a beautiful short bob, which was dyed black. So how can hair dramatically change the appearance? Vika was no longer at all like the former midwife from Toronto. Victoria went to Turkey for a reason. As a child, her mother often took her with her on business trips, and very often they lived in Istanbul. Therefore, young Vicky got language practice on the streets of this city. It was this city that she remembered most of all. She had always dreamed of living here, but her career took shape in Toronto, and she forgot her childhood dreams. Istanbul was teeming with tourists, and the population was over 14 million. It was easy to hide here from the police who were now looking for her. A couple months passed. Victoria found a job at the private memorial hospital. Of course, she didn't yet hold the position she had in Toronto. However, she could already boast of success at work. Canadian authorities were still looking for her, but never found her. Who would pay attention to a mother with 2 infants? There were 1 million of them in Istanbul, but sometimes people wondered who the father of these children was, to which Victoria replied that he had died tragically in a submarine, which was true. However, with one of the including circumstances, it was not her husband, and she did not even know what he looked like. But everyone doesn't need to know that. She did, however, often contemplate a drastic change in appearance. She could do a new hairstyle, a different makeup. But her facial features remained the same, and she needed to change that. And after a few months of living in Turkey, Victoria finally decided to take this step. Part of the money she received from the sale of her property and car, she invested in her face, her new beautiful face, which she really liked. She was no longer the ugly girl that no one wants to even meet. Now she was a beautiful Turk. Straight nose, high cheekbones, bushy eyebrows, eyes almost black from her contact lenses. And her skin was already naturally swarthy. And now she was already a heroine of Turkish TV series. Now all men looked at her as she walked along the streets of the city. Many wanted to talk to her, but so far she did not risk her position, because at any moment she could be twisted. Even though she had changed her appearance, she had lived like this for several years. Her quiet and happy life as a single mother brought her nothing but pleasure. Over the years, she was able to rise to the position of lead obstetrician and was again in charge of the department. She improved her skills in Turkish, and it was hard to distinguish her from a native speaker. The boys she named Michael and Joseph. These two names carried a certain value to her. Her favorite uncle's name was Michael, and Joseph was her father, who died tragically in a car accident. The boys grew up well-mannered, obedient. The woman always loved children, so she knew how to bring them up. They spoke English and Turkish equally fluently and correctly. This was the year they were to go to school, and even though the children were bilingual, Victoria decided to send them to a school for foreigners where the instruction was in English. She hoped that her children would want to travel, and for that they would definitely need well-practiced English, the world's premier international language. All the paperwork is in the rehabilitation department. The nurse mumbled and left the office. Victoria had no choice but to follow them. Passing by one of the wards in the doorway, she noticed a handsome man and for some reason decided to look in. She herself did not know what the motive for this action was, but she was instinctively drawn to the door. He was a pumped-up brunette. You could tell by the muscles that peeked out from beneath the hospital pajamas that barely covered his strong body. He had a scar on his very temple. With his hand, he clutched and squeezed the rubber bands that were tied to each of his fingers. He clenched his fist and clenched it again. And these simple actions completed Victoria with their beauty. Then Victoria saw the coach who had been making remarks to this match all this time. And suddenly, the man's gaze met the girl's eyes. She immediately closed the door and, shy as a schoolgirl, wandered down the corridor further, not understanding why this man caused such feelings in her. It was a couple of days after the incident and Victoria was back in the office. She had to sign some papers at the front desk. But deep down, she secretly hoped to meet that handsome man. And her wish came true. While she was signing another document at the counter, this stranger came over and stood next to Vicky. She pretended not to notice him, but tried to hide a smile. Well, the man took a ride. And you work here. The woman still pretended to be very busy and scrutinized the documents. And only for a moment, throwing a glance at him, said yes, with. And again she went deep into the study of papers. However, that fleeting glance of his beautiful blue eyes was enough to make the girl's heart beat frequently. She was even afraid that this knocking was too loud and ran away, citing urgent matters. In the following days, the girl began to visit the rehabilitation units more and more often. Always called to pick up some papers or help, although it was not part of her duties. Vike, why did you like him so much? Asked a girl at the front desk. Since they saw each other almost every day, they could already be called friends. However, Victoria did not allow any close connection. She was broken after her friendship with Samantha had been tragically cut short. I'm sorry, but it's impossible not to notice the way you look at him, especially since you've started showing up here every day. Even though your department is in a completely different wing of the hospital, it's so noticeable. The midwife's getting very excited. No, I'm the only one who's noticed so far. Well, maybe he has, the girl said, allowing herself a chuckle. Victoria didn't understand why she was giggling at first. However, Following her gaze, she turned around and saw his man, her dream man. She had already recognized the fact that she was indeed head over heels in love with him, even though she didn't even know his name. The girl was very embarrassed when their eyes met and immediately turned away. "Why didn't you say so?" Vicky whispered fiercely to her friend in the ward. "Oh, I can't believe you two are so funny." The SHA receptionist also quietly replied to her. Victoria gave her a judgmental look. Only she had the right to judge whether they were funny or not. Though no, it was already like a teenage crush in high school. "Okay, I can help," the girl offered. "But I'm not a matchmaker. I'll just tell you what I know. Would you like that?" "Of course I do," Victoria agreed, and apparently too loudly, because some of the customers turned to look at her. "Yes," more quietly, the girl said. "His name is Antonio. He's been in rehab with us for a month now. He had one foot amputated. No one knows why. But all our nurses are very eager to find out what terrible thing happened in his life." "What nurses?" "Oh, you're not the only one looking to be his girlfriend. He's handsome. That's a fact. And his lack of limbs doesn't interfere with his other physiological abilities. If you know what I'm talking about," said the girl with a wink. "What a naughty Susie you are. Anyway, I suggest you act quickly. Otherwise, this half-god will be taken away." Victoria was confused by the new details. First of all, she finally knew the name of her lover, but she was outraged by the boldness of the nurses. Once again signing the papers, she dragged them to the labor and delivery room a moment later, and all the papers were on the floor. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. Please excuse me. I didn't see you," spoke a deep, low voice. Vicky looked at the man and almost fainted. It was Antonio. His sky-blue eyes were looking straight at her. She could barely breathe. "It was my own fault. I didn't look where I was going. Maybe I could apologize to you over a nice cup of coffee." This divine man offered coffee. The girl hesitantly interjected. "There's a wonderful coffee shop up ahead. I thought you worked at that hospital. You've never been there." The woman did not explain to him that she worked in a completely different department and that she came here only for him. "But when I realized it was a chance, I just said, 'Sure, I'm on my lunch break.'" And then he started rocking back and forth to keep his balance. With a laugh, Antonio finished his story. Victoria had been laughing nonstop for about 20 minutes. She didn't think their dialogue could be so amazingly serene. It had been since their first date. Or rather, not really a date, since they were just having coffee in the clinic's coffee shop and eating. To the girl, however, this meeting seemed exactly like a romantic date. Such coffee breaks began to happen more and more often. And the day came when he invited her to have dinner in a restaurant instead of a coffee shop, arguing that he wanted to diversify his boring hospital life. But of course, Victoria realized that this was the real date she had been waiting for. They started going out together on weekends, eating ice cream, watching sunsets of the strait, and Vicky felt like she had finally found love, true love, mutual love. She introduced him to her children, with whom Antonio immediately found a common language and her expectation of real family happiness. It finally came true. Already after 2 months of such dates and meetings, the man of her dreams made her an offer. Their wedding was to take place at the end of the month. Victoria very responsibly approached this event. Most of the time she chose the wedding dress and set the very image of the bride. And all other matters were handled by Antonio. He was well provided for after his military service, and though Victoria never got to know his past because it was a very sore subject for him, she was happy to be close to such a wonderful man who she loved and who loved her. The wedding was modest by the standards of Istanbul. It was attended only by her closest family and friends, if they could be called that, but rather buddies and co-workers. Yes, Victoria's children. However, it was a really decent, good wedding of two people in love with each other. Antonio accepted her children as his own and began to raise them, as well as Vicky did. They were wonderful parents and a very friendly family with love and comfort and peace. However, their happiness did not last long. On one of the usual unremarkable days, our couple noticed that they were being watched. Nothing special seemed to be happening. However, the unpleasant feeling that they were not alone did not leave them for a minute. Their car was always followed by another car with different license plates, but always black and with tinted windows. Cautious footsteps were heard behind them, and suspicious figures crouched near the entrance of the house where they lived. They forbade the children to go out, to walk later than 9:00 p.m. That was the time it was starting to get dark. Victoria thought it was already paranoia. She never told her husband about her past, nor did he about his. He didn't know anything about her children or where she was from, so she was really quite worried about this surveillance. What if the authorities had found her after all? But was that possible after all these quiet years? It seemed unthinkable. Antonio reassured her that she was probably just stressed out at work. That's why it seemed absurd. 2 days later, however, their worst fears were confirmed. Victoria was making cookies in the kitchen with the children, as suddenly rang the doorbell. Most likely, it was Antonio who came from a walk with the dog and forgot his keys. Vicky thought, Joseph Sonny would be kind enough to open the door for Daddy, because I have all my hands in the dough, asked the woman. The boy under the squabbles ran to the door to finally meet his father from his walk. He didn't take the children with him, because the boys were a little sick, and Joseph had already missed his father. But when the little boy opened the door, he was very surprised. Behind it stood a man in a black cap and a black strict suit. It was not his father. The man seemed strange to the boy. It was rare to see people wearing such clothes in Istanbul in summer. Mom, can you come here? Joseph called out to his mother. Victoria was a little annoyed because she had to wash her hands urgently from the dough that had flown in. She left Michael to keep an eye on the spiritual and herself headed to her son's call. Yes, son, what's wrong? However, all questions instantly fell away when she saw the man in the suit. She knew it was the end. She had been found, but she kept her nerve and dared to speak to the stranger first. Good afternoon. Did you want something? Strictly asked Vika, putting her arm around her son's shoulders as if to let him know I'm with you. Are you safe? Victoria Wilson. Yes. Mr. Jerry Smith, private investigator. May I come in? Without waiting for an answer, the man thought he'd been let in and tried to walk over the threshold. But Victoria stopped him. No, I won't. Not until you tell me the purpose of your visit, the woman said in a stern tone. I'm here on Samantha Brown's case. Do you know her? Vike almost fainted. She felt dizzy and nauseous. She tried to keep her balance and spoke quickly. Please come in. Victoria led the man into the living room and asked the boys to stay in their rooms. This was a conversation they definitely didn't need to hear. But most of all, she was worried about her husband. If he found out, it would be a disaster. It turns out she had been lying to him all along. The girl put the unexpected guest on the sofa and offered him tea or something stronger, but received a polite refusal. Then the woman took a soft drink from the bar and poured it into a glass. I'm listening to you carefully, Victoria said, sinking down on the sofa. I understand that you are aware of the situation, and there is no point in explaining anything to you. Victoria understood perfectly well what was going on, but she had no idea whose interests this man represented. If he's a private investigator, he's not working for the government. No, sir, I don't understand at all what you told Vicky to do. What did the man with his fingers crossed start? Well, let's start at the beginning. I'll repeat my question. Have you met Samantha Brown? The midwife decided not to be deceitful. Yes, or rather, I did at one time. Then I'm sure you know what we're going to be talking about. I'm a representative of an organization that specializes in finding missing people. 3 years ago, an elderly couple came to me asking for my help, and I couldn't say no. They were Samantha Brown's parents, who had been searching for their kidnapped grandchildren for years. They had lost all hope of success. However, as I said, I'm a private detective, and it's my specialty to deal with such matters. The detective changed his posture and put one foot on the other. At that moment, Victoria heard footsteps. Vicky called out to the shocked and husbandwoman, "Who is it? Where are the children?" Victoria took a deep breath. She realized that she was about to have a tough conversation. It would most likely be followed by yelling and relationship proceedings. She was ready. "Children in their rooms, dear, as a private detective. Sit down and try to calmly absorb the situation." Antonio nervously sat down on the couch and began to examine the man as if it was his wife's lover. When he realized that this man was really who he said he was, he nodded and signaled for the detective to begin his speech. "I take it you're her husband, but it doesn't matter. I'll continue. An unfortunate mother fell into a coma after giving birth 8 years ago. A month afterward, her newborn twin babies were abducted." The man emphasized the last word in his voice. "Police and authorities tried for a long time to find the kidnapper, but without success. After a year, the poor mother woke up and regained consciousness. Her parents began an active search for their grandchildren, which again led to a deplorable result. Then they decided to turn to me, and I was finally able to complete this terribly difficult and confusing case. Sir, wait, I'm sorry, but I don't understand how my wife and I fit into this whole story. And what are you doing in my house? Mr. Wilson, I was hoping your wife would share her past history with you, but obviously, I'm going to have to do it for her now. No doubt this will be doubly painful for you. But Ms. Wilson has made her own choice." Victoria looked at the detective with a pleading look, but he was adamant. "Does the name Samantha Brown mean anything to you?" The detective asked her husband. Antonio's heart beat more frequently, and his breathing began to be interrupted. He hadn't heard that name in a very long time, and thought he would never hear it again. "I take it you haven't told your wife anything either." The man in the black suit continued in a sarcastic tone. "You two make a nice couple. You're just like Mrs. and Mrs. Smith. Exactly the same. Only the backstory's different." Mockingly, he added, "Well, I'll shed some light on each other's dark secrets for you, and hopefully there won't be a bitter war here afterward. Remember that there are children in the house." The couple looked at each other, puzzled. Their eyes read questions and fear of being bothered. "So, Victoria, let's start with you. First, and I think the most important thing you should know about your husband is his real name. Your Antonio is not Antonio. He changed his name. His name used to be Alexander, and he is the legal husband of your old friend Samantha Brown. Yes, you knew he was dead, I understand, but he survived that terrible explosion. Why do you think he had to have his foot amputated?" Victoria's eyes were filled with horror. She was in shock. She couldn't get her head around the information she'd received. Her husband is also the husband of her best friend, whom she thought was dead. Her husband is alive. But 8 years ago, they were told he died in a submarine. And it's good for you, Antonio, or as we've already established, Alexander, to know that the children you thought were her birth children are your and Samantha's babies. Victoria was the kidnapper. She was the one who snatched them that night. It was her request. She asked me to do it, Victoria shouted back. Alexander was also shocked by more and more facts. Not only had his wife been lying to him all along, but his ex-wife, whom he thought had died in childbirth, turned out to be alive and well, and still his legally documented spouse. The man looked at Victoria down the cheek of his beloved, and slowly a lone tear rolled down. Today they had both learned things about each other, something they should have never learned. It was supposed to be in the past forever. But it seems life likes to throw in unexpected surprises. I guess you have a lot to think about now. The trial in this case is scheduled for next Monday, 1 week exactly. Don't try to escape or do anything. You've already been found, and now you're nowhere to be found. Especially you, Victoria. We will find you, and we will find you quickly, wherever you are in the world. And one more small clarification. With a sneer, said the detective, I was about to leave this apartment. I forgot to tell you that both of you are under house arrest and the apartments are under 24-hour surveillance. But why didn't Samantha find me in that time? Why didn't she tell me she was out of her coma? Asked Vike in the slightest of tones, seeing off the man who had just ripped her life to shreds. That sweetheart, I can't know for sure, but think for yourself, who would want to be nice to the kidnappers of their own children? But I didn't visit them. The woman cried out. That's what you'll prove in court the rest of the day. I think I've made a difference in your relationship. You bastard, whispered Victoria. You will. Explain to me what that was all about, said the man as the door closed behind the sudden visitor. First, you explain to me how the hell you ended up alive. No, I'm serious. How the hell did you survive? Samantha said you exploded in a submarine. You'd think, wouldn't you? It's my fault I survived that horrible day. Alexander started screaming. I was picked up by a Japanese ship. Already calmer, he said, seeing his wife's frightened eyes. I had to have my feet amputated and was treated for a long time. But I am alive. I tried to contact Samantha for a long time, but because of my illness, it was very difficult to do so. I couldn't even remember who I was or where I was. But then a chance came up, and I went to Toronto, my hometown. I immediately went to see Samantha, my wife. However, her parents, who had always been horrible tyrants and despots, told me that she had passed away in childbirth and the baby had not survived either. And then, to forget my grief, I started traveling the world and stopped in Istanbul, where I met you. Sadly, said the man and looked sorrowfully and piercingly. Oh my God. It was all Victoria could say. Vicky, I'm sorry, but I need to be alone. Don't wait up for me tonight. I'll get a hotel room. Tell our children I love them. All this means the end. Victoria screamed in rage. Now you lay me, my children. They are only your children now. They've always been mine, and you. You have nothing to do with them. Angrily said the man. And with those words he slammed the front door loudly. Victoria almost collapsed on the couch and hid her head in her hands. She wanted to sob, wanted to throw herself out of the window, but she realized she would do none of that. Her boys were here, and they needed her. She needed to resolve the situation she had created as soon as possible. Would she never be able to be happy? The man she loved more than life turned out to be the husband, her best friend, and the father of her children. To think she had turned that thought in her head many times and couldn't find an explanation as to why life had been so cruel to her. She didn't deserve simple domestic bliss. And at one point, Victoria had an idea. She found the right phone number in an old notebook and dialed the number. The dial tone started ringing. You've reached Samantha Brown. Leave a message because I'm busy right now and can't take your call. The voice on the other end of the phone spoke, and the call went to voicemail. Vika hated it as much as she hated speaking words into a soulless mechanical void, leaving them unanswered. Today, however, she had no choice. Hello, Samantha. It's Victoria. Victoria Wilson. Your best friend. Ex-best friend. Victoria bitterly clarified. Call me back as soon as you can. I need to talk to you about something. The woman pressed reset. Now all she had to do was wait for the call. She looked up and saw Michael. Mom, where's that man? Why isn't Daddy here yet? Asked her son. Daddy is not coming today, dear. He was called to work. The girl lied. A tear rolled down her cheek. Mommy, are you crying? Concerned son asked. The distraught mother came running up. Did Daddy upset you? Yes. I'm sure he didn't mean to, Mom. It's gonna be okay. The woman cried. She never allowed herself to show weakness in the presence of children. However, today Victoria just couldn't hold back her tears. Michael leaned his head on his mother's shoulder. He felt very sorry for her, but he did not know how to help her. And Joseph is sleeping. After a while, Vike inquired, having calmed down a little. He always sleeps at 12 o'clock. You know that, smiled Michael. The girl gave her son a smile. Would she be deprived of these beautiful creatures that could make anyone happy on the worst day? She couldn't believe this was all happening to her. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare, but she realized that this was a cruel reality. A reality in which she would now have to live as she wandered aimlessly around the apartment. Vika looked at her phone. There was one notification reflected there. She had gotten voice messages. It didn't take a detective to realize it was Samantha. She pressed listen. Yeah, hi Victoria. I'm in Istanbul right now. I think I guessed that beautiful city. I suggest we meet tomorrow at 4:30 for coffee at the Mickey Mouse Family Cafe. That's the message. Samantha was not generous with words. Victoria realized that she was facing a difficult meeting that could surely affect the rest of her life. The next day, Vicky woke up very early. She could never sleep more than 6 o'clock, a doctor's habit. But after yesterday, which had turned her life upside down, she could barely sleep and only dozed off before dawn. So her head just split open. Antonio Alexander never came back, and she had no idea where he was. This day, she went from working all morning. She didn't know where to take herself. After making the kids breakfast and sending them off to school, she was left home all alone. Victoria turned on the TV and watched some endless series. She always did this when she was stressed. It was a kind of way to disconnect from the real world. It was 6 o'clock. The kids were already back from school. She fed them lunch and sent them off to do their homework. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Finally, the clock struck 3 times, and Victoria was finally able to leave the house. The man in black loomed outside the house again, but he did not prevent her. Apparently, this meeting at the cafe was part of their overall plan. It was only a block away. Vicky waited all day for this meeting. However, when the time came, she was very reluctant to show up in the direction of the cafe. Arriving at the appointed time, she stirred a little in front of the entrance, but still, gathering all her will in a fist, opened the door. She saw her at once. She was wearing the same dress she had worn the first time she had come to the cafe in Toronto to get to know her better. How much had happened. Ever since then, she'd wanted to have a déjà vu effect. What did she manage to do? They hadn't seen each other in 8 years. Come to think of it, it looked like Samantha had decided to mess around or push Victoria's guilt by taking another deep breath. Vicky walked toward the table where her former friend was sitting. She looked emaciated and thin. It looked like a whole year in a coma had taken a very bad toll on her health. Suddenly, Victoria realized that her former friend wouldn't be able to recognize her now with a different face. "Hi, Sammy, it's me, Vicky," she said as warmly as possible as she approached the table. "Hi," said Samantha dryly. There was no emotion in her voice. There was silence between the girls again, just as there had been the first time. "I guess it wasn't just a suggestion to meet." Vicky broke the silence again. "Yeah, sorry, just getting my thoughts together." "You look different," the ex-girlfriend remarked. "Yeah, plastic surgery works wonders. It's probably how you seduced my husband. Why would you do that?" "It's not like you, Samantha. Things have changed since you stole my children." "I didn't steal them." "How dare you say that to me? When you asked me to take care of them and not give them to your parents. That was clearly an emotional thing to say, and you should have realized that. I didn't ask you to steal my children and run away with them. I gave birth to them through pain, still in shock after my husband's death. What did you do? You decided that you could take advantage of the situation so that they could be yours now. But darling, I'm going to upset you. I'm taking them back. There's a trial in 6 days, and it's sure to give me my babies back. So if you want to say goodbye to your babies properly, you have those 6 days. Samantha, how can you be so cruel? Think of the kids. They don't even know I'm not their birth mother. To them, you'll be just a strange auntie and nothing more. You can take the children, but you can't have their love now. That's none of your business, Victoria. I've said everything I have to say. This conversation is over." The woman stood up abruptly from the table, threw the bill on the table, and rushed for the exit, leaving Victoria behind. For 1 week, the week spun. She had only a week left in her mind to somehow solve the problems that had come upon her. When she got home, she saw her husband standing at the panned window drinking something from a tall glass. Vicky carefully approached him. "Isn't it a little early to be drinking?" The woman asked, pouring wine into her glass as well. "Under the circumstances, it is the right thing to do." The man said calmly, "Why didn't you tell me your real name? Even after we were married, I wanted to forget Vicky's past. I wanted to start a new life with you and the children. We have. Everything was great until that goddamn detective came in. I'm so tired of this nightmare." "I know, me too, Tony," said the girl, deliberately calling him by a name that wasn't her real name, because that's what she called him in their most intimate moments. It was a kind of supportive reminder of their love. The man walked over and hugged his wife. He didn't know what he should do, go back to his former spouse and take the children. However, according to the documents, he had nothing to do with them. After all, he was a different man now. Antonio Jorge, a different person. And their father died in a submarine 8 years ago, but he didn't want to leave his second wife. He was truly in love with her. He did not want to destroy this marriage and just had no idea how to get out of such a hopeless situation. It didn't take long for almost all the days he had marked to pass. Victoria never ventured to tell their children that she was not their birth mother. However, she and Alexander decided to tell them something that would explain why the court would be held on Sunday and why they would probably be taken away by some strange aunt. They made up a tale that she and Dad needed to leave immediately and the kids might have to live with a foster mom. It happens. It's normal. They tried to indoctrinate their sons. At first, the boys rebelled. But after a while, they accepted the fact. Everyone in this house was now awaiting judgment, and everyone lived it in their own way. Victoria watched TV incessantly. Alexander drank and slept. And the children stopped doing their homework and played computer games all day long, feeling terrible stress. And finally, the day of the trial came. The trial was held in Toronto, as both Victoria and Alexander were still Canadian citizens. They were escorted to the trial by police officers who had arrived for that purpose. There was silence in the hall. The judge's stern voice interrupted the noise and conversation. "Based on all of the above circumstances, my colleagues and I have reached a decision. The court sentences Victoria Wilson to 15 years imprisonment under the articles kidnapping of a child, as well as obstruction of lawful actions of the authorities and forgery of documents. The children remain with their birth, father and biological mother Alexander and Samantha Brown." The room erupted in cheers and boos. Many were shocked by the judge's decision to separate the children, and the mother who raised them for 8 years was a crime in itself, thought many people who knew Victoria well previously. In the hall again heard the banging of the judge's gavel, and everyone could appeal against the court's decision can be filed in 2 months. Until then, the guilty will be taken into custody. Alexander looked for his beloved Victoria with his eyes. However, when he saw that she was twisted by 2 officers and led to the exit, he almost burst into tears. He only had time to see her devastation. Sighting the sight of a man who had lost all hope on his shoulder, someone's light hand lay on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Samantha holding their children's hands. "It's time for us to go home, dear," the woman declared. The first month with his new family dragged tediously for Alexander. He and the children moved into Samantha's parents' house. It was far from the center of Toronto and looked more like a ruin. The house looked just awful. Stripped wallpaper, dampness, marks on the mirrors and no cleaning. Dirt on the scraped parquet, some where the boards had already rotted. The kids were assigned a Merca-sized common room for household items. The children never accepted their new mother. On the whole, she turned out to be a worthless wife and mother. The children were mostly looked after by their grandparents, who were very stiff and ironic in the household. "You dropped a cookie. Now you're obligated to eat it, shake off the dust, and you don't get a new one. For another month you're cornered for every offense and sometimes deprived of food." Another day, Samantha's mom yelled at Michael, I pay so much money for you. How dare you study so disgustingly? You don't pay for me. Madam is providing for me. My father proudly replied the boy. Oh no, come here, trashy. Your father abandoned your own mother. Poor thing. Left alone. That thing named Victoria has totally spoiled you. I'm gonna drink the shit out of you. Continued to shout crazy grandmother, but already crying child. Alexander, seeing this scene, spoke to himself at the boy. How dare you yell at my son? Strictly asked the father. He is a careless, lazy, and arrogant boy, and Joseph is his exact copy. 8 years they've had it drummed into their heads. Now it's time to set them straight and make good Christians out of them. 2 lunatics with those words. Alexander turned and took his son to his room on the 2nd floor. Did you see what your mother did too? Asked Samantha's spouse, who was sitting by the TV. As glued on the sofa, beer bottles and cookie crumbs were lying around. The woman didn't work anywhere or do anything around the house. Those kids are getting a little frustrated. Alex, they need to be raised properly, but not with violence. That's the best way to beat the crap out of them. The woman repeated her mother's words while drinking another bottle of beer. The man moved closer to the sofa. He was tormented from the pungent odor of cheap alcohol and his wife's missing clothes. Are you drunk, Sam? I got a right to be. And you settle your kids down and go to work. The man shook his head in hopelessness. As they left the living room, which looked more like a brothel, her husband turned and said, You're not the Samantha I used to love. Your parents have changed you so much over the years. Samantha, you can't go on like this. However, when he saw that the woman wasn't even listening to him, he walked away and swore to himself that he would get out of this nightmare and get the children out of here. Alexander tried to spend as much time as possible with the children so that they would not be harassed by this sadist. However, while he was away on business, they were treated by his father-in-law and mother-in-law, and Samantha herself, who also often practiced this way of upbringing. The man could not fully protect his children from this family, and he could not take them away from this nightmarish house either. After all, by court order they had to raise them together. And the social workers were checking on that every 2 weeks, and Samantha herself was not at all eager to leave her parents. More and more he wondered how Victoria was feeling. How was she? Was she okay? How was she handling the situation? He was not even allowed to visit her, as he was forbidden to do so. Alexander was simply dying of despair. The man loved Victoria more than life. Yes, he used to be head over heels in love with Samantha, but she had changed. She was no longer the sweet and cheerful girl he had met at some party in Toronto years ago. Everything had changed since then, and life was divided into before and after, so he decided to take action. He found a good lawyer in town who could help him with the case, and even though he had to pay most of his personal injury settlement, it was worth it. The lawyer said there was a chance. I saved you. Without me, you. Without you, we would have lived just as happily, the man summarized, and left the bedroom, which reeked of dirty linen, alcohol, and cigarettes. It had been exactly 2 months since Alexander had last seen Victoria. He hoped to find her now in good health, cheerful and healthy. He dressed well and prepared himself for another hard day in his life. Samantha would be furious when she found out that Victoria's defense counsel was being sided with her husband, and he was ready for it, her judgmental eyes on him and weeping with anger. The eyes in the courtroom were full of people. Everyone was terribly interested. Where would this convoluted case end? There were 3 bangs of the gavel, and there was silence. Everyone in the courtroom, please be seated. Thank you. The judge scrutinized some documents on his desk, then looked around the room with a stern look. I asked the prosecution to come forward. A murmur went up. While in the center of the hall, certain people on the prosecution side came out. Along with the prosecutor, Samantha spoke. Standing up, she gave Alexander a caustic smirk. Suddenly, the courtroom doors fell away, and 3 officers walked inside, followed by a handcuffed woman. It was Victoria. Alexander's breath even caught. She looked exactly the same as she had when she'd been led away from here 2 months ago. Sure, she had lost a little weight and her hair was different, but her face was just as full of longing and hopelessness. She was led to a special place for the condemned, which was rewarded with 4 clear panes of glass. The defense side, please. The lawyer nodded to Alexander, and the latter went out following him. He did not look into the hall, because he already knew that there was a look of surprise on people's eyes, and Samantha was probably glaring at him. When he reached the podium, however, he still had to look up. And sure enough, the first thing he saw was the outraged face of Samantha, who clearly wanted to kill him right there. Unfortunately, he could not comfort his Victoria. After all, she was beyond his reach. But he was sure she was proud of him. That's exactly what Samantha Brown had reassured him. You are a victim in the abduction of your children. You claim they were stolen a month after they were born while you were in a coma. That is correct. Yes, Your Honor. The defense. What do you have to say to us? Alexander's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, it's simple enough. There was no abduction per se. The day Samantha gave birth to the twins, Victoria was her midwife. Before Mrs. Brown began to lose consciousness, she asked Mrs. Wilson for a favor. To quote from the witness, "Please take care of them. Don't give them to my parents." The judge didn't seem very convinced by these words. Can you offer any convincing evidence that that was the case? Yes, Your Honor. There are 3 people in this courtroom who were present that day at the clinic when Samantha Brown gave birth. They are our witnesses and can corroborate what I am saying. 3 people were called after that statement. All of them were women. Among them was Lily, who took over as chief medical obstetrician, and after Victoria's departure, Sarah, who had risen to the position of midwife, and another nurse. The judge interviewed each one, and they all testified the same thing. That's what happened. Samantha had indeed asked Victoria to take her children. Sam looked at Alexander with a judgmental look. At that moment, she realized that she was walking on thin ice because 3 witnesses was a serious line of defense. However, her attorney also had a strong argument that she hoped would outweigh the defense. Your Honor, Samantha's attorney took notice. Please take note of the fact that Samantha's physical condition did not allow her to make such serious decisions. As you know, after these words she went into a coma, which indicates that her mind was foggy. There was a commotion in the hall again. Everyone began to discuss the details of the story. Your Honor, Alexander began. The children grew up with Victoria as a single mother for 7 years. She was able to raise them into fine, well-mannered boys. They received a proper education, and they always had a favorable home environment, which is not the case with Samantha and her parents. The lawyer told his client to be clearer. I didn't want to use that as an argument. However, I'm going to have to. Samantha has suffered from alcohol addiction for a long time. I lived with the children at her parents' house with her for those 2 months, and that was long enough for me to realize that it was a completely inappropriate place for my children. An assistant came up to the judge and put some papers in front of him. You can see it from the photos I took personally, Alexander said. But that's not all. I have seen my children physically abused many times, their grandmother and grandfather. I had to protect them from physical abuse, and their birth mother, Samantha, is completely unable to raise them. I believe that children do not belong in such a family. Independent experts from the Juvenile Guardianship Commission were invited to the home, and they evaluated the situation and gave the report that is on your desk. Your Honor, counsel added. Samantha was quiet, groaning and swearing foully. She realized this was a complete failure. The court went into session, and until the verdict was reached, everyone in the room could rest for a while. Many people supported Alexander. Some came up and expressed their sympathy for him. Victoria smiled from behind the glass and thanked him with her eyes. He was proud of the work he had done. Finally, there was silence in the hall again. Silence. The judge came out. Everyone waited with trepidation for the decision of the peaceful gavel to strike again from the knocking 3 times. The court decided to recognize Michael and Joseph George, Antonio George, and Victoria George, with Victoria Georgia S. as the legal guardians of the minors. All charges previously filed are dismissed, the judge proclaimed, cutting through the noise in the room. He tapped the gavel again on Samantha Brown's biological mother. Permission to visit her children at a time to be determined separately after her treatment at the rehabilitation center. The trial is over. There will be no further appeal. The hall gave a standing ovation. Alexander had no idea how many people were supporting him. Victoria was uncuffed and released from the cage. She immediately ran up to her husband and smothered him in her arms. "I've missed you so much," Alex cried to the woman. "It's okay. We'll be fine now," he soothed his beloved. The taller children surrounded them. On her beloved mother, Victoria began to hug them, to kiss them. She hadn't seen her poor 2 months and didn't know if they would ever see her again. The woman did not let go of her children for a long time and led them by the hands all the way out of the courthouse. There they got into a cab and went to the hotel. The next day, the plane was already taking them away to their home of Istanbul, which had already become their home. It was there that Victoria's happy life began, where it would continue. Finally, the family was at peace again. Everything stabilized, and they all healed as before. After compulsory treatment, the court allowed herself to visit the children every month, any day by arrangement with their guardians. 2 months after she was discharged from the clinic, she wasn't seen at all. She seemed very angry about losing the case, but Victoria and Alexander did not want to see her, so they did not even try to call her. One beautiful summer day, however, a phone call came. Samantha said that she would come to the children in 2 days to spend time with them. She apologized for her behavior and assured that she holds no grudges. She just wanted to see the kids. Victoria, of course, was still hostile toward her former friend, but she had to put up with it. "Are you sure it's going to be all right?" Joseph asked at breakfast. "Of course, honey. We're doing this because you need to know your other mom. It wouldn't be fair if she couldn't communicate with you." That's how Vicky reassured the boy. "Yeah, I guess so. But she's bad and cruel." "No, she won't be mean to you. I'll be there for you all the time. Let's try to have a normal conversation with her for once." The doorbell rang. The boys were scared. Their father was at work, and it was he who represented in their eyes the greatest defense against this terrible woman. A voice came from the hallway. "The boys are in the living room." A woman with long white hair walked into the kitchen. It was Samantha. She didn't look the same when she was at her parents' house, no longer drunk and unkempt. Now she had smoothly combed hair, good makeup, and decent clothes. She looked pretty decent. That image inspired confidence, and "We're having breakfast here," Victoria explained, sitting down at the table and gesturing for Samantha to sit down as well. "Do you like pancakes?" "Of course. We used to have them a lot with you." When the woman in the class fell silent, she realized that she shouldn't have remembered those times when they were mysterious friends. "Yeah, I remember," broke Vicky's awkward silence, "which means you can eat a couple of them." "Because I've cooked too many," Samantha happily agreed. They had a strained discussion about the weather, the kids' favorite breakfasts, their progress in school. The conversations were decent enough, and Victoria was beginning to calm down. The idea of putting up with Samantha in her house once a month didn't seem like such a terrible phone call anymore. "I'm going to step away for a moment," Victoria muttered with a smile. The boys were a little concerned about their mother leaving, but Samantha kept them busy asking questions, so they were a little distracted. "I am called to work, so I will unfortunately leave you for today." Vike turned to the boys. "Samantha, can you keep an eye on them? Today they have a chance to play with them if you want. It's very bonding. And then tonight we'll watch a movie together. Just please not a scary movie. Otherwise they won't be able to sleep without a student for a week." "Mom," an embarrassed Michael shouted indignantly. "I'll shut up. You guys are the bravest. I love you. I'll be back tonight. Please don't do anything here without me." Daddy will be home early anyway. And Victoria left the house. What should we call you, Auntie or the other mom? Joseph asked. Samantha was a little angry at such an inappropriate question, but did not show it. I think it would be easier for everyone. If you'll just call me Sam. The boys laughed with relief. Good, Sam, Michael said, looking at his brother and his reaction. He grinned, too. So boys, I can see you're having fun already, but why don't we continue the fun and go to the amusement park? Who's in favor of amusement parks? Didn't Mom say to stay home? Michael asked, surprised. Your mom said I should just keep an eye on you. That doesn't mean we can't go have fun. So pack up, and we're leaving in half an hour. Do you have a car? I thought you came by airplane. Yes, my dear, but we can hire a car. So let's pack up and go on a real roller coaster. The children scurried merrily to their rooms to get ready for the park, while Samantha stayed in the kitchen drinking tea. Her plan had worked flawlessly so far, and she was pleased with her foresight and fortunate circumstances. CCU. I made myself known at home. Mother, entering the apartment, it was surprisingly quiet and dark. Maybe the children had already gone to bed. It was already 11 o'clock in the evening, so Samantha had probably put them to bed. Vicky decided. Maybe their friendship wasn't completely lost yet, and they could at least partially regain their old and good relationship. She peeked into her bedroom. Alexander wasn't there yet, but he warned her that he might stay out late tonight, so Vicky wasn't particularly worried. Tony or Alex. Sometimes she was lost as to what to call him now. He was in charge of security at a nightclub and often came back late. She poured herself some tea with rose petals and sat down in the kitchen. Leafing through social media feeds, she thought it was strange that Samantha had left without waiting for her. Maybe she'd fallen asleep, putting one of the boys to bed. Victoria decided to check the room. What she saw, or rather didn't see, shocked her. The beds were empty, with abandoned things lying everywhere in disarray. She ran to Michael's room, where she saw the same picture. Vicky began to nervously call herself. The number was unavailable. She called again. This attempt ended with the same result. Then Victoria rushed to the bedroom at the speed of light. Her hunch was confirmed. Missing were all the children's papers, birth certificates, insurance, everything. The girl's hands began to tremble with shaking hands. She dialed her husband's number. He didn't answer either. What the hell was going on? Where did everyone disappear to? They decided to run away with the children together, left her alone. However, she found Alexander's passport. He wouldn't have left it behind if he wanted to run away. So he did stay at work. Maybe something happened. While she was gone, a burglar broke into their house, took them hostage. Victoria's mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. In the back of her mind, however, she'd long since figured it out. This mysterious disappearance. Samantha had kidnapped her children. She tried once again to call Alexander to no avail. There remained the only way out: the police. The girl dialed the number and waited for the operator to answer. She was told that the patrol would arrive in a few minutes. However, these minutes lasted like an eternity. Victoria pressed her fingernails into the pads of her fingers. She always did this when she was wildly stressed in some places. She even developed small scars. The doorbell rang. The woman opened it instantly and invited the police in. They were two officers of large build, which inspired confidence and was even reassuring in some way. So, ma'am, repeat again. What were the boys wearing? When did you leave for work? Asked the officer again. I told you they were in their pajamas, and when I went into their rooms, I saw clothes scattered all over the floor. They'd obviously changed clothes. Officer, hysterically declared the mother. The man offered the lady a seat and a drink of water, which she did. A little calmed down, she said to my scene, but then into the apartment came the very one who had just been talked about. Alexander looked at her with round, horrified eyes. He quickly discerned people in police uniforms searching around the apartment and taking pictures of everything. What's going on here again? Vic, shocked, asked the man. The dark-skinned man of full build who was holding a pen and a piece of paper looked at him. "Sir, come this way. We will quickly explain the situation to you. There is no time to waste in the precious time it will take to find your children, my children." "Victoria, where are Michael and Joseph?" Alexander was already shouting. Victoria couldn't take the pressure and burst into tears right in front of everyone. "Sir, you waste time yelling. You are worried about your wife and children." The man realized his mistake and approached the officer with the same terror in his eyes. "Your children stayed with their birth mother all day, and your spouse went to work entrusting her with the boys. I know that. She told me everything. She was urgently called to work." In a calmer tone, said Alexander, "We suspect Samantha Brown of kidnapping your children. Can you give us any information about her whereabouts? Maybe she called you." "No, I haven't received any calls. My phone died at work and I couldn't get through." Alexander walked over to his wife and sat down next to her. Now the officer was interviewing the two of them. "Do your children have any phones or means of communication?" Victoria wondered. Because of the stress, she did not immediately understand the policeman's question. And then it hit her. She even got excited. "Yes, they have cell phones. We bought them so they could call us from school in case of an emergency." Victoria immediately realized her mistake. Why didn't she think of that in the first place? Call Michael or Joseph. They would have answered for sure. They're smart boys. They'd think of something, wouldn't they? "Did you call them?" The officer asked in a stern tone. "No, I didn't." But the officer didn't let her finish. "Great, give me their numbers." The woman dictated her children's phone numbers. And then she stopped talking again. She looked at Alexander, trying to find support in his eyes. Her husband locked his arms around her shoulders, and they waited together. "What does the officer say?" "Boney," said the officer into the radio to the right of the number I just dropped you. "Get the location." The policeman took one look at you alarmed couple. "Don't worry, we'll find them. We found people after they've been reported missing only days later. It's gonna be okay." His walkie-talkie forbidding voice spoke out. "I found them, but they're in completely different places. It's weird." The kids were together. When the couple heard this information, they panicked. Had Samantha killed them? But that couldn't have happened. She wouldn't kill her own children. The officer was also in a stupor, but into his walkie-talkie he ordered, "Send a car to each of these addresses. Have them clear every handful of land there." "Copy that." The voice on the phone went dead. "Do you have any idea where they might have gone?" "Toronto," Alexander said out of the blue. "Samantha flew to us from Toronto. She probably rented a car to drive there. They wouldn't let them out at the airport, but she'll be driving there. God knows how long." The officer objected. Samantha would hardly be intimidated by that. An hour later, they were on the highway. The detective stated that his men had found 2 cell phones, but they hadn't found anything else. Perhaps Samantha had done it to throw them off the trail. However, after a thorough investigation, they learned that there had been 2 carjackings in the area of the exit highway. Perhaps the woman was changing cars to get away from the pursuit. Alexander and Victoria were traveling in a car with police officers. They found one of the cars that had been abandoned in a field. It contained the children's belongings. Vicky found Michael's favorite sweater there. "Alex, we'll definitely find them," sobbed the girl, clutching in her hands the only native thing they found during the search. "Vicky, it's going to be okay. We'll catch up with them. We'll make it. The main thing is not to despair," replied her husband. Although he himself doubted the effectiveness of this chase, they drove to another scene of the accident. There they were met by a man who reported the theft of the car. "She cuts me off, pulls a gun on me, and throws me out of the car. I didn't even have time to object before I was on the street without my car and without my dog," the victim emotionally recounted. "You had a dog in your car?" The officer was surprised, writing down all the statements. "Yes, they stole my little girl." The victim gave them the license plate number of his car and also showed them the direction the crazy woman could have gone. "What did the kids look like?" Victoria braked the man. "They were intact. They didn't have any bruises. No, startled by this reaction, the man replied. They looked tired. However, they didn't try to run anywhere or ask for help. Samantha seemed to be beckoning to their brains with her mind. She could spin any nonsense she wanted, such as that they were going to visit her, and there would be a mom waiting for them. Mom or just scared them a lot, and the kids would just obey her. She could lie about anything. The cunning of this woman was obvious. "I've got them," one of the uniformed guys told the officer. "They're taking the Atatürk highway. We can catch up with them." "Get in the car," ordered the officer to the tired couple. They were exceeding the already breakneck speed with every new second. And Victoria thought they would eventually crash. She and Alex were in the car along with 2 policemen. The first was driving. The second was negotiating on the radio. The other cars were traveling behind them. Suddenly, around the corner of the highway, they saw a car with the same license plate. It was them, Samantha and their kids. "I got them. We're in pursuit. You're spreading out on the highway, blocking traffic so she doesn't turn anywhere. Do it," shouted the officer to the officers on the radio. "We've almost caught up with them," the officer stated. To the trembling parents of Samantha Brown, "Stop the vehicle immediately," shouted he into a megaphone. "Are you breaking the law? I repeat, stop the vehicle or we will open fire." Samantha's response almost killed Victoria. Literally, a bullet flew over her shoulder. After recovering from the initial shock, she saw the wounded officer in front, who was sitting next to the driver. The bullet had scratched his arm. She really does have a real gun. Victoria became even more worried about the children. The car wiggled from side to side, trying to catch up with the perpetrator. And then something happened that Victoria didn't expect at all. A bullet slammed into the driver's arm, piercing the windshield. Failing to control himself, he crashed into a fence as if it took Victoria an eternity to hear the whistling and laughter in her ears. Opening her eyes, she saw blood. A lot of blood. The officer who had been sitting next to the driver had been thrown through the windshield straight to the ground. The driver himself was typing into the airbag and was unconscious. But when she saw Alexander, she felt nauseous and pained, but he was alive. She realized it by the movement of his chest, which rose and fell. He was simply unconscious. He probably had multiple fractures, though, because he took the hardest hit, realizing that there was no way she could help him on her own. The woman got out of the car. 2 SWAT cars and an ambulance were already approaching them. Victoria showed them where the people were and ran to the other car. They hadn't gotten far yet. "Give me the car. I'll catch up with them." She screamed hysterically. "You can't drive." "Calm down." Victoria came right up to the sergeant and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. Her eyes glittered with anger. "My children are in mortal danger right now, and I don't care about your rules or laws. Give me your goddamn car, or I swear I'll force you into it and you'll drive me." "Okay," agreed the policeman, frightened by her energy. "I like your plan very much. Just calm down. Please, get in the car. I'll drive." Victoria fast got into the car. A moment later, a young sergeant got behind the wheel. It looked like he was just starting to work for the police, and maybe she would deprive the poor guy of his job and his life at the same time. But all she cared about now was her children and their well-being. "They're speeding up," the woman shouted. "I can't. We're gonna crash this whole thing into pure suicide. Take the wheel." "We're going to switch places now," Victoria declared. "You're not entitled. I'm entitled to everything when it comes to my children. Either you switch places with me right now, or your family gets word that their kid died in a car accident." Of course, Victoria's lying. However, the boy seemed to be impressed by these threats. He held the steering wheel while Victoria shifted into the driver's seat. At one point, she sat on his lap. The guy grimaced in embarrassment because Victoria was wearing a short skirt. "Look at the road, not there," yelled the furious mother. Finally, when Victoria finally switched the kid and places, she pressed hard on the gas. There were only a few meters between them and the car they were chasing. Samantha tried to fire again, but it only slowed down the speed of the car Victoria was chasing and missed. Victoria was almost able to catch up with Samantha's car, and that's when the worst happened. As they hit the bridge at breakneck speed, did something happen inside Samantha's car, and the car slammed full speed into an iron pole, causing a fire? No, there was Victoria's heartbreaking scream. "Oh God, no!" Pulling up to a safe distance so that the imminent explosion wouldn't spread to their car, Victoria jumped out and ran to the burning car. With difficulty, she opened the back door of the car. She felt a wild pain as she opened the door, which was just as red-hot as lava. Vicky cried out in pain, yet still crawled into this burning hell. She prayed to God that her children would survive and her prayers would be answered. She pulled first Michael and then Joseph out of the car. Both were unconscious, but alive. And that was the most important thing. Get them to emergency services and get them the help they needed. Ordered that an ambulance be called here as well. Ordered Vicky to run up to the boys. The man nodded, grabbed the children in his arms, and put them in his car. Already in a moment, the car was rushing down the highway in the opposite direction. Now it was up to Victoria to find out what had happened to Samantha. She ran to the front driver's door and, remembering a past mistake, wrapped her hand in her shirt. Only then did she pull the door open. What she saw horrified her more than anything else she'd seen that day. Half of her face was churned into her chest, with the debris of something iron jabbed into it and pierced through her. But the worst part was that she was still conscious. Samantha barely turned her head. All that could be heard was a faint wheeze singing from her shattered lips. "Blood. Shut up. Help is coming. Just be patient a little longer," Victoria shouted, as angry as she was at the kidnappers. This was her friend, though they had betrayed her, yet a friend. And Vicky couldn't just stand by and watch Samantha die. "I'm sorry, Vicky. I'm sorry," sang Sam out of her last strength. Victoria squatted down and put a hand on her shoulder, as if to support Samantha. "My sweet Samantha, why did you and I have to make such a mess?" Vicky's tear rolled down her cheek. "I can't survive," mumbled Samantha in their arch into the blood. "Vicky's God. He will take me to heaven. But I want you to know, I never wished you harm. I want you to forgive me." The woman began to choke, blood gushing from her mouth. Victoria whispered, "I forgive you. Sam, of course I forgive you, and I still love you. Go in peace, my darling. Our children." Vicky didn't get a chance to finish. Her friend passed away in front of her. Victoria cried out in unbearable heartache. She had lost someone close to her who had given her true happiness. Be that as it may, it was thanks to Samantha that Victoria found a husband and children, found a real family. Happiness is nothing but close people who stay with you, no matter what you do. And Victoria was insanely grateful to the team that life had brought her to. She spent the rest of her life restoring Samantha's good name in the eyes of her children and their mutual children. She seemed to have succeeded. Her husband was devoted to her until his death. They lived a long and happy life and gave the world another living being, another child, a girl, their not-so-good little Sammy, who was named after the unfortunate mothers of their eldest sons who had died tragically.
Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
In one of Russia's major cities, something had been happening for a long time that angered many residents, but no one wanted to fight it, and no one knew how. Vanessa was born into an ordinary family. She had a mom and a dad, and a grandmother. They didn't live very rich, but they weren't poor either. They had just about everything they could live on. "Mommy, I want pancakes." A girl came into the kitchen on a Saturday morning. She was 5 years old at the time. "Of course, darling, we sit down at the table," her mother tells her, and she turns away from the stove. Started making the delicious, thin, open-work pancakes that the whole family loved so much. "Daddy, why isn't it coming?" The girl asked. You know he probably has no time. But he will definitely come. The mother looked into the corridor to see what her husband is doing. It was a very close-knit family. If everyone was at home on a day off, then after breakfast, they were sure to get together and go for a walk in the park. There they had fun with their daughter, and in the evening they could come to visit their grandmother. This was also their tradition. Mom, can you stay with Vanessa next weekend? The woman asked her. Yes, of course. Where are you going? As if Grandma didn't care, but wanted to know. You know, my high school friend invited us to her wedding, and for once we're both free and decided to go. Her daughter answered her. A friend's wedding is good, nodded her head and smiled at her grandmother. All week there had been some tension at home. Her mother was nervous, her father was late coming home from work, and Vanessa could feel it all. But she didn't say anything, because it happened so often. Saturday morning the family had breakfast as usual. After that they started to get ready to take the girl to her grandmother, and they had to go back and do all their chores. They had to dress up, do their hair and makeup, and go to the festivities. Mom, when are you coming? Vanessa turned to her. My favorites. You will be home tomorrow. Mom told her. She gave her a hug and a kiss. After that they left. Vanessa and her grandmother went about their business. It was fun here too, because the woman read interesting books, told various stories. In the evening, the grandmother called the girl to the kitchen. What are we going to reap so late? Vanessa asked. No, do you want us to make cookies with you? Asked her grandmother with that voice. Cookies, just like they make in the campfire. The girl was surprised. Well, yes, in the fire we will make with you at home. Where have you seen that they make them in the fire? The woman became curious. When my mom, dad, and I went camping, we had a big bonfire burning. And at the end, when there were red coals left, Dad threw potatoes in there and buried them. Then it was delicious. We sat eating, Vanessa told her, and closed her eyes, remembering it all. That's great. You want me to feed you exactly that now. Nancy took some potatoes, washed them under water, turned on the oven, and put them straight down without any pro-morning pan. They sure wouldn't burn in there, peeked Vanessa through the glass of the oven. No, don't worry. They'll be ready soon. You'll feel like we're camping in the woods, said Grandma. And indeed, when the potatoes were taken out of the oven, they burned in some places just like a campfire. But when it was laid out, there was a scattering of pulp, which Vanessa, just as she had then on the camping trip, poured over and gobbled up. Well, it's delicious, she told her grandmother. What did I tell you? Smiled the woman. After such a dense dinner, they drank tea with milk and went to bed. Do you want me to tell you something? Nancy asked her granddaughter. Oh, if you can, tell me some interesting story. As the girl lay in her separate bed, the room was dark. You know, we lived in a time when there were no communications, few cars, and no roads. That's when it was very interesting. My grandmother remembered. Tell me how you worked in the field. Yes, the field was interesting. The whole village would gather there. We would come, and everyone knew and did their job. Grandmother paused for a long time and remembered how good it was when she was young. And what happened later? Why do you live in the city now? I'd like to know, Vanessa. And then they wanted to build a big road through our village and started to buy houses from the locals and exchange them for city apartments. Of course, I didn't want to go for a long time, but my children talked me into it. Now I live here hard, sighed Nancy. You could hear that he didn't want to move here. I see. But some of my friends go to their grandmothers in the country for the summer. I could go to you too, the girl said. She yawned and fell silent. Nancy realized that the girl was already asleep. She too turned on her side and tried to sleep. But for some reason, the smartest woman Varia studied side by side. She didn't understand why she couldn't sleep. There was some kind of excitement in her chest, and towards morning her heart seized strongly. Vanessa could only say she had difficulty breathing. My head hurt very badly in my chest. "What's wrong with you?" She couldn't understand what was going on. Jumped out of bed, dial 03. She just exhaled. Vanessa dialed the number she was told. She started to ask who it was, who was sick, and what they were doing. But the girl only cried into the phone and said that she needed to come to her grandmother's house right away. The doctors asked for the address, but the girl did not know it. Then she had enough sense to go out on the platform and knock the neighbor. "Why are you here so early? Open this door. Please help, Grandma is bad." "I don't know." Address through tears uttered the girl. Female neighbor ran to the phone, told everything to the medics, and ran into the room to see what was going on. Nancy T was lying on her back, breathing heavily. She was not feeling well. The medics arrived quickly. They took her blood pressure, did a cardiogram, and suggested that Nancy go to the hospital. "I can't leave my granddaughter alone." "Oh, come on. Don't worry. She'll stay with me until their parents get here." The neighbor was worried. Nancy was taken away. Vanessa stayed in the neighbor's apartment. "Grandma, what's going to die now?" she asked the woman. "What are you talking about? No one is going to die." She stroked her head and held her close, and it was early Sunday morning. And 4 o'clock later, they learned that a terrible tragedy had happened almost at the exact same time. Me and Hope. Vanessa's parents were ready to go to the celebration. The woman had bought herself a beautiful dress for the occasion. The man wore a suit for once. "Why don't you always dress like that?" his wife asked him. They got into the car and went to the place where they were already waiting. Everything was fun and interesting. Nadia did a lot of dancing. Or was I talking to friends I hadn't seen for a long time? And in the morning, when they were going home, they started to talk them out of it. "Oh, come on. We'll get away all right," said William. "Why don't you stay at least until dinner?" the bride asked them. No, we have a daughter waiting for us. That's why we have to go." The parents were convinced they were right. They had almost reached the city when they were overtaken by a KAMAZ with a trailer. It is not known what happened, but the trailer backed sharply and hit the car in which William and Nate were traveling. The man failed to control the vehicle. They pulled to the side of the road for a long loop only to flip over a couple times and eventually crash into a pine tree. An ambulance was called immediately. William died on the way to the hospital, and Hope 2 o'clock afterward. She, without regaining consciousness, passed away. When Nancy was brought to the hospital, it was all talk. The woman heard familiar names. She felt even worse. She asked the doctors. When they named them to her, she passed out. The doctors did everything they could to get Nancy's health back on track. She was lying under IVs as her friend, neighbor Molly, along with Vanessa, came to see her. My grandmother held out her arms to her. "For more when you go home. And why aren't Mommy and Daddy picking me up?" she cried. She looked at Molly and gave her a look that told her to get the child out the door when she returned. The woman told her what had happened to Vanessa's parents. Jesus, how could that be? The neighbor put her hand over her mouth. "I also think what will happen to the child now, how to tell her about it." The grandmother was very upset. After she was discharged, she came home, immediately put on a black handkerchief for pain. "Why did you put on that ugly handkerchief?" said to her granddaughter in the kitchen. "Honey, come to me." Vanessa King, grandmother, sat her on her lap and began to tell her about her parents. "You see, my dear, Mommy and Daddy are gone. They have gone to heaven forever behind your shoulders. This is where Mommy here Daddy showed, and for the rest of your life they will be with you by your side to protect you." "I know that." The girl raised her eyes at her. "As you know, to you," Molly told. Her grandmother didn't understand her. "No, I dreamed about them crashing the car." Vanessa sat there, tears in her eyes. She wasn't crying. "I see." The next day they went to the cemetery. Her grandmother showed her where her parents were buried. There Vanessa had already let the tears flow. Even though she was a small child, she was still very emotional. The next 3 years, the girl lived with her grandmother. There were no problems with anyone. Only the grandmother was often sick at this point, And if she did get taken to the hospital, Vanessa would sit with Molly as usual, and Nancy knew it couldn't go on like this for much longer. And still, child services would come someday, the moment she wasn't home. And so it was. Specialists. You knew the woman had a long history of illness and absences. The child is with a neighbor, so they just came one day and took Vanessa away with them. When Nancy found out about it, her heart just couldn't take it. Now Vanessa was being raised in an orphanage. Then, as the years passed, she never said she had a bad time there. And now, when she was there, she did not argue with anyone, did nothing. The girl was only interested in studying. She dreamed of becoming a popular actress or an announcer on television, but only to be seen by everyone. Almost all of Vanessa's free time was spent in the library. She was reading different books. Also, the girl went to the theater circle, where she could recite poems and various prose very well and beautifully. At school, she studied well. Not at the tutors, not teachers. There were no bickering neither on studies nor on behavior. And here came the day of graduation. On the one hand, it was sad to say goodbye to this place, but on the other hand, realized that now she will enter the study, and her dream will be realized. Of course, the girl dreamed of the Theater Institute, but she could not get there, so she went to the journalism department. It was very interesting to study. Vanessa lived in the apartment of her parents, and therefore she did not need anything. She thought she had all the friends she needed, except for those she had been with in the orphanage. If they hadn't been very close friends there, now that they were meeting, they were socializing so close it couldn't be helped. "Hi guys, come on in," said the girl to them when they came to visit her. Vanessa loved it when they had company over. "What are we going to discuss today?" They sat in a semicircle, and every time they discussed something new. Vanessa served tea, juice, some kind of snacks, but they put it all together from the scholarship. There was one young man in the company whose name was Liam. Vanessa liked him, and today, when they were together again, she'd gotten up the courage to ask him to stay when everyone was leaving. And why was he sitting in front of her in the kitchen? Nothing. Just wanted to talk to you one-on-one. Vanessa looked at him. Liam was kind of nervous or just really worried. Vanessa started some topics, but for some reason the guy didn't support her. It made her uncomfortable. But every day they met, their relationship grew warmer and warmer. "Let's not invite anyone over tonight. Let's go out alone." Finally, Liam suggested. "Okay, I agree." She smiled back at him. They walked around, talking about many things. Then the young man hurried to the dormitory. "Why don't you have an apartment?" One day I asked him, Vanessa. "Oh, there is, you know, such a long story on the Marshal. Boy, come and tell me tomorrow," she said to herself. Thought she'd found an excuse for him to come visit her again. The next day, when the vapors were over, she and Liam went to her house. She had prepared an unpretentious lunch. They ate and also sat at the table. "So, why don't you have an apartment?" "You know, there's a situation," he started to tell her. "So what's it like?" I really wanted to ask her about it. When we graduated from the orphanage, they promised to give us apartments, but it turned out weird. Some got them, and some didn't. The guy didn't really know what was going on. "Why didn't you get one?" She poured tea in a mug. "They called me in and told me there were no apartments and offered me compensation. Of course I accepted. Better a bird in the hand than a crane in the sky." Liam looked up at her. "And the money?" "Of course, you've already spent it all," Vanessa said knowingly. "Well, not everything, but I don't have enough for the apartment, I told you." "I see. If you want, you can move in with me," she said, hanging sugar in a mug. She offered it to him, although she liked the offer because she liked the guy. And what would it be called? He was smiling. "Liam, I like you." Vanessa lowered her eyelashes, afraid that after this confession the guy might get scared and just run away. "You know, I like you too. I was just afraid that if I told you about it, you'd eat me right away." Told her fool. The girl laughed. "That's for sure." He laughed with her. Today he went to the dormitory, and for tomorrow, He promised that he would think about it. And if the answer was positive, he would pack his things and move in with her. For tomorrow, Vanessa was waiting for him near the institute. And I really wanted his answer to be positive. And Liam, I did. I'm so glad. She jumped around him as they all stood there. Come on, there's nothing to be excited about. Maybe I'll turn out to be a bad person, or a bad housekeeper, or I won't clean up after myself. Yeah, it'll be okay. I know it will. They went home and settled down. And today Vanessa decided to invite her friends over for a dinner party. I'll help, Liam volunteered. I'm sure you will, she told him. The guy and the girl hadn't met yet, but they complimented each other so much that Vanessa would start talking and Liam would realize what she meant. The guy starts to do something, and she's already there to help him with it. Listen, Liam, I want so much to become a famous editor of some magazine or an announcer on TV. Did you want to be an actress? She confessed to him one evening when they were sitting at the table. Well, wait, now they will teach you, and you will become. He told her to cheer her up. Do you know what it takes to do that? Look, I'll think of something. Let's find some interesting stories that happen on the internet. Maybe in our dormitory or just in your yard. You'll do the interview and I'll shoot the reportage. Liam said dreamily. That's a great idea. She liked what the young man was suggesting. After that, as Liam told her, they started to find out something somewhere. If there was any hot news, they went straight to it. Tell me, how do you feel about all this? Vanessa asked. The people who were involved in the story, they turned their backs on it and people left. A lot of people did. But the grannies in the courtyard weren't the least bit shy. While Liam was filming them, they were telling Vanessa about what was going on in the yard. How the sewer burst, the heating didn't work, and the janitor didn't come to work. They had all kinds of news. Vanessa and Liam in the evening when they were editing it, everyone was laughing. But it's one thing to finish. Where am I going to go with this material now? She said, referring to the great-grandmothers who told her all the do's and don'ts. Nothing. You're the one still practicing. When you have a real reportage, then you can brag. Right now, nobody needs to practice their skills. He was always optimistic about the river. When the girl was in her 3rd year, she was sent as the best student to a seminar. After it, there was a gala evening. Vanessa sat at the table, bored, as suddenly saw a man. She recognized him as a famous editor and decided to approach him. Hello. She approached him. Hello, hello. He turned to the girl. You don't know me. My name is Vanessa. I was sent from our institute as the best active student. I would like to ask you something, she told him. I'm listening. He went to a table and sat down. The girl did the same. You know, my cherished dream is to become a famous reporter or interviewer so that I can anchor the news on TV or travel, shoot reports at this point, while she was talking very shy. That's commendable, he told her. Tell me, what does it take to do that? She looked up at him. You know, initially you need to graduate from the institute, and after that either for a diploma or just like that. You have to do something to get noticed. The best way to do that is to get off a hot report, the man advised. I hear you. She got up from the table. She walked home today in a good mood. When Liam met her, he was very surprised. Why are you so happy? You have no idea who I met today, she said to him and dragged him to her room. Vanessa couldn't stop talking. She realized she was probably boring Liam, but she couldn't stop. Well, there you see the first hint that you are destined to have your dream come true. I have no doubt that you can do what you have planned. He put his arm around her. I doubt it. Where to find a good story? And those in the news business, they're always being told what's going on where and what's going on. What about you and me? What do you mean? What? Well, you see, school's coming to an end. Maybe we'll get some kind of assignment. He told her. Well, let's hope so. And Vanessa didn't believe that any of this could happen. All the rest of the time she was just sniffing out different scoops, but nothing interesting was happening. Listen, what if you interviewed a person that everyone would like to know about, but he doesn't tell anyone anything? What do you suggest? Contact some star. The girl looked at him. You realize that would be impossible. Well, why with a star? The young man wondered. And from whom then? At our director of the orphanage. I think that she also does not tell anyone anything about herself. Oh, stop joking. I'm serious. She got offended and turned away. Oh, come on. They were already in the 4th year. They had to think of something urgently, because there was less and less time left. Liam himself had to do something, but it was not his cherished dream, because he could work as a simple worker in a small printing house or magazine. Come on, hurry up, get up. The girl from this morning. What are you, still a veteran? Even the alarm clock is still ringing. He squinted from the sun that hit the window. Well, let's go, please. She asked him and poked him in the face with some paper that it was in the table. He could not wake up. Today a popular band is coming to our town. And suddenly she was silent on the guy. Didn't know what she meant. All right. Only I don't believe anything can come of it, Liam said. He saw how agitated the girl was. Got up, washed his face, grabbed his camera, and they headed closer to the airport. There they stood in the waiting room for a couple more hours. Why did you have to get up so early? Oh, come on. She poked him in the shoulder. I was wondering why no one was here. Liam looked around. There really weren't any reporters or photographers around. Maybe he's not coming by plane for sure. I didn't think of that. That's okay. Maybe I'll get tickets to the concert. St. himself stood and already thought who was pulling his tongue. Can you do that? She did not believe the guy. That it is possible. At least I'll try. And your task, if I do it by any means, to get backstage to their dressing room. It was the only way to get any material. All right. Now the young people were faced with tasks that were unrealistic to accomplish. Liam was scrambling amongst acquaintances, everywhere he turned, and finally decided to try his luck and go to the box office, even though he knew that there were definitely no tickets. Good afternoon. Do you have a couple of tickets for the concert? Young man, where did you come from? I smiled at him. The cashier from there pointed to the entrance, realizing that the woman was joking with him and there was nothing in the box office. All right, I see. She held out 2 tickets to him, which I can't believe how I thought it was so impossible to get them. He stood there dumbfounded, looking at the 2 small pieces of paper. You're the lucky one. I am. The tickets are long gone, but there were 2 young men today. They just canceled for their own reasons. He was smiling. Thank you, guys. I wanted to hug that woman, but he couldn't. And the kids are already making your soulmate happy. She knew he was taking 2 tickets for a reason. And thank you again. He went to the exit. The concert was already tonight, and there was still time. Vanessa, no. You won't believe it. He ran into the apartment. What are you yelling about? She came out to him. Look what I got. He was holding out 2 tickets to her. Where did you get them? They're definitely real. They can't be. I bought them at the box office. He kissed her on the cheek. So now the hardest part is getting backstage. She sounded like she was talking to herself. And what are you going to ask them? And what are you going to ask them? You thought about it. He got curious. Look, she was standing there looking at Liam. All right, I'll figure it out. Since the tickets were in hand, they had to pick an outfit and start packing. Vanessa thought about the young man while she sat in front of the mirror. He had promised her that he would get her what was impossible, and he had done it. He must really have some feelings for her. So you ready? Standing in the hallway, yeah. Vanessa came out to him beautiful. He took her by the waist, pulled her to him. Thank you. She punched him in the shoulder. For what? I didn't realize. For putting up with my every whim. She knew how hard it was. Because he stopped talking. I love you, she finished for him. Yes, he blushed. And you. They walked out of the apartment. Tonight was going to be an interesting evening. The young people entered the lobby of the building where the concert was to be held. It was unbelievable. Fans were shouting something. CDs with songs were being sold. The crowd was cheering and wanted to get into the hall. Vanessa looked at everything that was going on. Maybe we'll try to get backstage now, Liam suggested. Do you think that if it was possible, the groupies would still hang out here? The girl laughed. But it's worth a try. They walked past people, into the corridors, where there were some offices. And here Whispered said the guy quietly put his finger to his lips and knocked on the door. We asked not to be disturbed until the concert, it said. I'm sorry, Vanessa said as the door opened. What did you want? Her childhood idol stood in front of her. She stared at him and couldn't get a word out. Hello. Was Vanessa acting like a fool? 5 interviews saw the artist Liam with a camera. Can we at least ask 2 questions? It's for our diploma. She's such a star. Vanessa stood like a pillar of everything, her young man said. Okay, just get your girlfriend out of her stupor, the man smiled. Vanessa, let's go. Liam pushed her. Oh yes, she realized she was being ridiculous. They walked into the room where the rest of the band was, saying hello to everyone. If you're in good faith, you're welcome. We are people just like you, laughed the entertainer. Did you like our city? Vanessa asked, when the interview had already begun. It's not my first time here. I can say that I will come again. But that says it all, answered the singer. And how do you feel about your female fans? Vanessa couldn't think of anything else to say, and her head wasn't working at all. It's good. They support us. Except that we try to be away from them. Who can tear up? Laughing, the answerer. Vanessa asked 5 more questions, and then it was time for them to go on stage. Thank you very much. We in the audience turned to Liam and thanked everyone. Thank you for being adequate. And your questions are on hold too. The artist gave him a poster with the autographs of all the musicians. You have no idea what a valuable gift it is for her. The guy looked ahead, where Vanessa had already gone. She seemed to be still in shock. And then it was fun. The girl danced so hard that when they walked home, she couldn't feel her feet under her. I just can't believe it happened, Vanessa said on the way home. And it did, walked a companion beside her. They arrived home. The poster was immediately placed on the wall in the most prominent place. The girl stood opposite and admired it. I am happy. She collapsed on the bed. It feels like you don't need anything else in this life, but everything is possible. She closed her eyes and remembered her idols again. 5th year was coming to an end, and Vanessa hadn't done anything else. What are you worried about? You have an exclusive. Not so provocative questions there, but still reassuring like a regular me guy. Okay. At least I just had an interview to do. I already have one. And with who? She put her index finger up and calmed down. Everything would be fine. The exams were excellent. The young people were even recommended where they could get a job. Liam was happy with this option. But Vanessa not so much. She decided not to settle for a while, to look for a better place. So what are you thinking? Liam asked her at home. He's been working for weeks. Look, I've been going through all the papers and you know what I found out. She was looking at him, and you could tell she was thinking about something. Of course not. He laughed. There is an official in our town. He works in the administration. A few years ago, he was a simple lawyer. Then he began to climb the career ladder. And at the moment, this man has millions of dollars in accounts. No matter how many times we try to interview him, ask him where it all comes from, he shuts down, doesn't say anything. The most important thing is that this man goes everywhere with guards, and there is no way to approach him. Vanessa said. She's been scouring the internet for any information. So much for flammable material. Liam thought, what can I do? What if I come to the administration under some guise he will check? We'll meet, and then I'll ask for options. Girl. I think he's not as stupid as most people think he is. The young man also pondered the options, but the girl still decided to try her plan. In the morning, she dressed modestly and went to the place where Michael worked. Already after she entered the main doors and was stopped by a guard, he asked her for her ID and who she was going to. When the girl said her last name, he shook his head negatively. Why didn't Vanessa understand? To him, you need to sign up a month or even 2 months in advance. Now he is busy. He made it clear to her that he wouldn't let men in. What are you doing there? The girl left the building. I realize a man with nothing to hide wouldn't do that. Vanessa returned home, waited for Liam from work, told him everything that had happened to her. Now she had one goal in mind, to get this Michael guy to talk to her. But how to do it? The girl, alas, did not know. Look and try to find out what places he goes, what he does. Maybe there is his hobby on the internet. The young man advised her. I've been looking. There's not a line. All I got is the position he holds. And that's it, Vanessa said sadly. Or maybe there is nothing, Liam speculated. Look, how can a simple administration position have so much truth? I recognized all their property, registered to his wife and son. It was clear that this man was in the girl's head. All right, then let's follow him. How do you envision it? We'll sit around the corner. And when he comes out and gets in the car, we'll run after her. Vanessa laughed. She's right. Yeah, you're right. All right, I'll think of something. Girl, I knew if she was up to something, she wouldn't quit. Not until it was finished. And that would be when Vanessa realized it wasn't interesting. In the meantime, she realized that there was some mystery here. The girl really started to visit the administration building every day. She noticed that at lunchtime, and a few times a day, Michael went to have tea or coffee in a restaurant that was not far away. But when he has visitors or perhaps meetings, he drives his car, and where only he knows. Vanessa, I've got some great news for you. How are you home, Liam? And what was that look she gave him? We were on an errand on the outskirts of town today, and I saw your Michael's car there. So I thought I'd take a look. It was a cheap coffee shop, and he was really there. She said to gesticulate with her hands. The young man is interesting. What was he doing there? Yes, and I wondered why a man with so much money in some diner. The guy calmed down a bit. Let's go tomorrow, and you can show me the place. Vanessa made some notes to herself in her diary. Okay, agreed. And don't forget to take the camera, the girl reminded him. After that, they sat down to dinner. Vanessa was silent, and Liam, I did not distract. He realized that now she was thinking over a plan. The guy left the table, went to the room, and the girl sat at the table. She was staring at one point. A mental process was going on in her head. Of course, I thought a lot yesterday, but I realize if there are guards with him, they will definitely not let us near, Vanessa was saying. But we can watch from afar so as not to arouse suspicion. That's exactly what Liam was going to do. That's what I was going to suggest. They left the apartment. The young people quickly reached the place where Michael had been yesterday. They found a comfortable place to sit where they could see everything from, and no one would notice them. Do you think he'll come today? The girl stared at the entrance. Well, I don't know, Liam shrugged. It was his day off today, and he had to sit around sucking it up. In the middle of the afternoon, people began to flock to the diner. What kind of people were they? Vanessa was amazed. She couldn't even think what a man from high society could be doing here. At some point, an expensive car pulled up to the building. The very man they were waiting for got out. You're not going. Liam turned to her. Take the picture. She pointed in the direction where the cafe was. Now we'll see what happens. They watched. Michael entered the hall. The windows were so dirty that nothing could be seen through them, but already the man in the jacket could be distinguished from everyone else. Vanessa got up and went there. Only she wanted to go in, just as the man's guard approached. What are you? She looked at him. You can't go in there yet. The man told her. Why? I just wanted a cup of tea. Made a surprised face, girl. Wait a bit, and you can go in. He didn't let her in. that her well looked the girl inside and managed to notice that the man was talking to a young guy. She turned back to Liam. "I have what?" asked the man. "No," she exhaled. They realized that they had nothing to catch here today, so they decided to drive back home. All the way the girl was thinking about something. She realized that there was no way she could get to this man. She had to think of something. A chance happened to help her. "I went to work one Liam day, and I was ready to go out." "Wait, where are you going this early?" "I want to go to the orphanage. I haven't been there in a while." She often visited that institution because she liked to visit children. "Why don't you go to the place where we were raised?" Asked a question and immediately thought that I did it in vain. "I guess I'm not ready to go back there yet." Okay, let's go." Liam gave Vanessa some money to buy some candy or kids. "Thank you." She kissed him. When the girl was already there, she smiled at those who had just been taken for a walk. "Hi." She entered the lot and sat down in front of one of the boys. "Hello." Looked at the kindergarten teacher because he was afraid of being scolded. "Don't be afraid." She took it, handed him a candy on a stick. "Thank you." He grabbed the candy and ran to the others. "Why are you guys doing this?" The teacher came over. "Oh my God, Vanessa, I didn't recognize you. I just came to visit you again." She gave me some candy for the other kids. "Thank you. You're so kind." The woman looked at her. "Can I stay here with you?" The girl asked. "Yes, of course." When the walk was over, she was invited to have tea. "Yes, I will go a little about the other," appeared Vanessa. They entered the building, went up to the second floor. "Let's go to the organization room." The teacher called her. "Aha." The teacher hurried after her. Vika had never been here before. Usually she walked with children in the yard or walked them to the group. And now on the desk of one of the specialists, the girl saw a business card of the very Michael about whom she wanted to know so much. "And this is our sponsor," strangely said the employee. "Why so, do you know? He helps us strangely." She couldn't say anything else because she didn't know. It turns out he's a benefactor. Vanessa thought that was good for her. Yeah, he's got a couple of clinics he sponsors. The kindergarten teacher poured tea. Which ones were the girl more interested in? One, I think. The psychiatric one. I don't know, thanks. Something stirred in Vanessa's soul. She realized she could get to this man, but she didn't know how. She didn't want any more tea now. She drank it so as not to offend the man who, if invited. The girl was in a hurry to get home and needed to think things over. Liam was not home yet. She was waiting for him to consult. He arrived only in the evening and saw the girl sitting in the kitchen looking out the window. "Hi." He walked over to her. "And the fire. Can you believe it?" She told him what she had found out today about Michael. "Wow. I need a plan, and I think I already have one. Will you tell me if Liam's interested?" "Yeah. We need to break up, separate." Vanessa was looking at a young man. "What are you going to do?" This old man didn't understand the guy. No, she was sitting next to him. "After I found out that he sponsors a budget institution in our city, I decided to get there under any pretext. There's no way to get into an orphanage. I don't fit in as a pupil. Even if I did, it's not an option." She started smiling, probably imagining it all. "So you want to go to a mental institution?" Liam concluded. "Exactly. And for that we need to break up. And I don't see what the point is. What's the easiest way to get there?" "I don't know. Throw it out of the window," Liam suggested. "Well, that's exactly it." She got to her feet again and started to run circles around the kitchen. "Are you really crazy about this, Michael?" He was shocked at what his girlfriend was about to do. "Look, I'll do it carefully. You realize you'll have a record of you doing it and being there." "I realize that. But if it works out, I'll get it cleaned up afterward." She looked at the couples. Everything had to be carefully planned before putting her plan into action. Vanessa believed that she would succeed. She planned to get into a mental hospital. By the way, her patient, and when the sponsor arrives, that's where she catches him. The girl thought that if he wouldn't talk to a normal person, He probably talked to a hospital client for sure. Go away and don't come back, she yelled at Liam at home. What are you telling me to do? I know what to do myself. He spoke loudly back at her. This scandal was specially made for the neighbors, so that no one would have suspicions that the family, which had lived for a very long time in good relations, could now act like this. What are you doing there? Shouted she again to him. Bag packing, he shouted back. And hurry up. She opened the door, and still on the landing continued the scandal. After Liam left the door, she purposely did not close it. Vanessa went to the bathroom, took a blade, and made a small cut on her hand near her wrist. What are you doing? She ran back into the apartment. Go away. Get away from me. Pushed at him. The guy called an ambulance. All the neighbors who heard and saw everything that was going on had already gathered. She needs to be hospitalized right away, said Vanessa, the EMT. They put her in the car, took her to the nearest hospital. Since the damage was minor, doctors looked, treated, interrupted. That's where the law enforcement officer came in. So we need to write up a report. Sat across from her. Okay, I'll do it. She made a guilty face. Do you confirm that you self-injured yourself? I'm asking you a question. Yes, I do. You understand that we must now forcibly take you to a psychiatrist. The same man said. Yes, of course I understand. She cried. And what was there to cry now, if everything had already happened? Another doctor entered the room she was in. He looked at Vanessa and asked what had happened. You see, I was brought up in an orphanage, and so was my boyfriend. We started living together. Everything was fine. And now he found someone else and left me all this time. She was crying her eyes out. Calm down. He sat down next to her and took her hand. How can I calm down here if I love him so much? She tilted her head. So today I'm warning you that if this happens again, we'll have to take you to the clinic because you're mentally disturbed. Do you need help? The doctor said, got up and left the room. Vanessa stayed there for a few more minutes, then got up and left, called a cab, and went home. She dialed Liam's number. He was waiting for the call. Husband, what? He asked me. Nothing worked out this time. Just a simple warning. What are you going to do now? Nothing, to try again. She was surprised he was asking her that. You're the pushy one. He was amused. A month or so passed. The young people never moved in together because they didn't need the neighbors to see them together. Vanessa was alone. That day she went to the neighbor's house on purpose. Hello, Miranda, she said to her when she opened the door. Hi. Come in, honey. I heard their last scandal. No, I just came to ask you if you had any valerian or Pasternak to calm me down. She was talking in a panicked voice. Yes, of course. Now the woman fussed. She ran to the kitchen to fetch the medicine. Vanessa knew that if she questioned the neighbors, Miranda would definitely confirm that she had taken it from her. Thank you very much. Vanessa walked back to her apartment. She left the door slightly open because she knew that the neighbor was very nosy, and she would definitely come in to check what had happened to her. This time, Vanessa took some pills. Yes, she knew that if she drank enough of them, it could really lead to some sort of dire condition. But the girl had it all planned out. She emptied the box, destroyed everything, left only a few pieces so that if she was analyzed, it would definitely be confirmed that she drank these pills. The girl lay down on the couch and quickly watched the dream. It didn't take long for Miranda to arrive. She opened the door of her apartment ajar, looked to see that the neighbors' doors were not closed. Vanessa walked there, but no one answered her. The woman entered the apartment, saw her young neighbor lying on the couch. Her arm was thrown aside, and a bottle of pills was lying on the floor. My God, what have you done to yourself? For reading, she urgently picked up the phone and called an ambulance. Vanessa never regained consciousness. They took her to the ward. She woke up already in the ward where I'd spoken to her. She came in immediately. The doctors started questioning her. Why did she do it again? I can't live without him, she screamed. This time the same doctor who was there the first time came to see her. His name was Benjamin. "And this is you again. Sorry, didn't get it. Eyes down. Now I warned you. I never joke. So now we're packing everything up, and you're moving to a completely different clinic." "Maybe you shouldn't," she resisted. "What do you mean, don't? Look at you. You have a real mental disorder. You need professional help." After saying that, Benjamin left the room. He said that he would wait for Vanessa outside in the car. The girl did feel a little uncomfortable, but on the other hand, she was glad that she had succeeded, and she wanted to be in this clinic, and she would be there. The other thing was that Vanessa didn't think about the consequences, even though Liam had warned her, but now she had a completely different goal in mind. Vanessa was brought in and placed in a room. Everything was exactly the same here as in a normal clinic. If you didn't know where you were, she knew she wouldn't be put on any tranquilizers or any other poison pills. And she was sedated. She went to counseling with a therapist and a psychologist. There was nothing wrong with that. "How are you doing?" Benjamin came to see her. "Better," she said. "Well, if you want, you can come out for a walk in our yard. Just promise me you won't do anything stupid." "That would be wonderful." Vanessa was glad that she was not locked up here. As they walked down the corridor, she could see that the equipment here was very good. Everything is state-of-the-art. "Tell me, do you have someone helping you?" She was starting to get the man talking right. "You know, like any institution, we have sponsors and kind people who do charity work. Like Michael, for example." She raised her eyes to him. "How can you be so knowledgeable?" surprised the doctor. "I was brought up in one of the orphanages where he also helped." "Then it all makes sense. Yes, he's a very good man. He helps us." Benjamin stopped by. "And he comes here himself to see what you're up to." "Yes, at the end of every month he comes here." Vanessa realized that it was still 2 weeks away. But she didn't despair. She was only going towards her goal. And so when this time passed, she went out on purpose to see when Michael would arrive. The girl saw a man in an expensive suit walking along the road, but it was not the one she wanted. He was much younger. And today the ambassador's son said one of the women who was here turned to her. "Vanessa, to you our sponsor, who launders money through the hospital, the son of his ambassador," spoke the woman. Well, Vanessa understood. A new plan was now maturing in her mind. She realized that if she couldn't do anything with Michael, she could make friends with this young man. The girl specifically calculated the time when he would walk back, and at the moment when the boy was walking down the path, she was there too. Oops, she tripped right in front of him. "Girl, be careful," he told her and even helped her. He held Vanessa's hand. "Thank you very much." She looked him straight in the eye. "It's all right. Take care." He looked at her too. When he put her hand down and walked towards the gate, she stood there looking after him. The young man looked back. "What's your name?" "Vanessa asked me." The girl realized that he had turned his attention to her Ethan. He walked on and came out of the gate. She did not see what he did next. The next day, the girl didn't know what she was going to do here, but she wasn't going to leave. "How are we doing?" Benjamin came into her room. "Yeah, you know, everything seems to be fine now. I can go home." Vanessa asked him. "No, my dear, you need to stay a little longer," he said. "What do you say? But I do feel much better already." She spent the whole day outside, and afterwards she just lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. The next day, when she went out for a walk, she was very surprised to see Ethan again. "Hi," he said to her as they met eyes. Hello, she hadn't expected to see him so soon. "You know, I don't know what it was that got me then. But that look you gave me, I still can't forget. That look told me about myself." The girl was jubilant. She never thought it could be so simple. They went to a bench and sat down on it. At that moment, Benjamin came up to them. "Ethan, hello there," he said, and looked at him, and Vanessa surprised. "Hello." He greeted him too. "What are you doing here?" You weren't supposed to come today. You could see the man was nervous. You know, it just so happened that I decided to come. The young man didn't know what to say. Vanessa looked at her slyly. Doctor, it's all right. The girl turned to the guy. She was smiling, and even though she thought he was actually smiling, she was glad that she was really starting to get things going, and not for nothing had she come up with this plan. Tell me, why are you here? Ethan asked her. You know, unrequited love, she said sadly and pretended to cry. Can you elaborate on that? I wanted a guy to help this girl. What kind of details? Don't you know what it's like? Sodding. Okay, well, I have a rough idea. But he stopped talking. What did you have like that? A girl couldn't believe him. You know, my dad runs everything I do. When I was in school, I only had to do what he said, and then go wherever he said. And I can't meet girls anywhere because I'm always with my dad at work or at home. He said it in such a way that Vanessa believed him. Wow, I thought it was different for you rich people. She talked to him like an old friend. Want to go for a walk? She asked me. Yes, we could. They got up and walked along the alleys that were here in the courtyard. The young man was interested in Vanessa. He was ready to talk to her for hours. The next day, Ethan was in this courtyard again. Again, they walked and talked about everything. I feel so good with you. The boy confessed to her. He looked at her so much that it was impossible not to believe those words. I don't think there was any love at all. I just happened to have no one to support me in a difficult moment. She turned her face to him and walked back. You know what I think? What? That you don't belong here at all. I can help you escape. He whispered that last part. Honestly, she couldn't believe it, that a millionaire's son would go out of his way to help some orphanage. Of course she did. I agree. She also whispered, wait for me. We'll work something out tomorrow. He moved closer to her. Vanessa felt that he wanted to kiss her, but didn't dare. Ethan left and Vanessa went to her room. She saw Benjamin watching her from his window. The girl lay on her bed, thinking about what and how things would go from here. Now that Ethan and she had nothing to stop her from getting into Michael's family, she needed to think things through thoroughly. She needed a camera and a microphone. How hard could it be without Liam? But for now, she couldn't let him go to her. Vanessa, can I see you? Benjamin came to her room. To be honest, you scared me. Tell me, what's all this circus for? What circus? She made big, surprised eyes. Why did you have to come to our hospital for Ethan? We asked her directly. No, she didn't. It wasn't because of a young man. She did it all right. I can see that you have a budding relationship, and I also know how his father feels about it. She sat down on the table. Benjamin, if I tell you everything, how lazy of you to tell anyone, she asked him, and put her hands together. Tell me, he tilted his head. I want to become a journalist, so she began to tell him everything in order. The girl saw the doctor's face change as she told him. I don't understand why the pills had to be taken. He was shocked by the story. Look, Rodina wants to make an escape tomorrow. He's probably going to make a deal with one of the staff. Don't bother him, she said. God, I've never seen anything like this in a hospital before. And he got up and walked toward the door. So what's your promise? I will. Only you'll come back later and tell me what you got. Sure, the girl nodded. She stayed again. She lay alone and thought, if Ethan really wanted to kiss her, what would she do? Accept it, then betray Liam. Even good intentions wouldn't help. Vanessa thought for a long time and then just fell asleep. In the morning, she got up in a good mood, washed her face, got dressed, and went outside. Guess who? She felt someone's palms cover her eyes. Oh, I don't even know. It must have been Benjamin talking, she smiled. No, you didn't. I switched to jokes too. Like, hello. Vanessa turned to him. So you ready to go? He looked around so no one could hear them. True to form, she made a surprised face, put his finger to his lips. How did you do it? She spoke in a low voice. I'll tell you later. if you need anything. Did they go somewhere behind the building? No, she held his hand. They climbed out through some hole one of my brothers showed them. Thank you. The young man showed him the classroom. He did nothing but nod his head imperceptibly. Where are we going now? Asked the girl. To my place. Without hesitation, answered Well. Vanessa was jubilant. She had achieved what she wanted. I need to call and warn my brother, she asked. He has a phone. Of course, it's near Kiev. I'll step back. Vanessa looked at Ethan. And you should have told Liam to get everything ready. Of course, he was fine with this young man. Vanessa dialed a number. When she was answered, she told him where to go and what to bring. She told him to get everything ready and to wait for her outside one of the stores. Liam understood everything, said he would. Thank you. Gave it to Vanessa, Ethan's phone. But everyone went. He was ready for anything. What if they look for me just in case, she asked. Don't worry about that. We'll figure it out. The guy was confident. Okay, let's go to the store. My brother will bring me a bag of stuff. And my phone. She asked for one more thing. Okay, whatever you say. They drove off, and after a while they were at the place. Vanessa got out. She acquired Liam at that moment, managed to whisper in his ear that everything would be fine. She would explain everything to him later, picked up her bag, and got back into the car. Now they were on their way to the house of the one the girl had been after for so long. Of course she was worried. What if Michael found out? But it was too late to back up now. Come in. He opened the door for her. They entered the big house, which was very beautiful. I thought you lived in the city, in an apartment. Yes, we have a place there too, but we spend most of our time here. The young man didn't hide anything from her. A woman came down from the second floor. She looked young. Good afternoon. She stopped. Mom, meet Vanessa, my girlfriend, her son said with a smile. Nice to meet you. The woman showed no emotion, but Vanessa assumed that it was not the kind of party parents wanted to see next to their son. And this is Lisa. The young man smiled. Nice to meet you too. The girl stood there. And what did you bring and get acquainted? Or are you going to start living together right away? How arrogant? Asked the woman. But the mother said to the parents, as if to reproach the woman in something. Come alone in the evening will come father. We'll sort it out, she said. Turned around and went. The young people passed in one of the rooms, which was guarded with Ethan. The young men walked to one of the rooms, which turned out to be Ethan's. There he showed her where she could put her things. Downstairs is the kitchen there, Natasha, from whom you can always ask for something, he told the guests. I'm uncomfortable, she said in response. It's okay. I hope my father will understand. Sitting down on the bed, she said sadly. There's no need to be upset. Vanessa sat next to him. The girl realized that if the guy had not dated anyone before today, now it was important to him what his father would say. Immediately other thoughts came to mind. What if he decided to take revenge on his parents? They wouldn't let me date anyone. Then I'll be with her. She smirked. What are you doing? He turned to her. You do realize that you and I are from different social strata. And even if you're not allowed to date me, I won't take offense. It was as if she was preparing him for the fact that sooner or later they would have to break up. What are you talking about? I fell in love with you at first sight. You realized there was no one young. And here's the first girl who reciprocated. It's like she talked him into it. All right, we'll see. He shut up. In the evening, when the head of the family came home, everyone began to gather around the table to have dinner. Maybe I shouldn't go, Vanessa asked, because she was afraid of being recognized. No, we need to introduce you to Daddy. Ethan held out his hand to her. Okay. Vanessa took her purse, which had a small camera in it, and they went downstairs. Both parents were already sitting at the table. They were waiting for the son and the girl to come downstairs. Apparently, the mother had already told her husband about who was now living in their house, because all he could do was stare at the stairs when the young ones would already show up. Hello, everyone. Ethan was cheerful. He introduced Vanessa to his father. He looked at her and didn't recognize her. "Hello," the girl nodded. At the table, everyone was silent. Stood for a while. When it was over, Ethan asked Vanessa to take a little walk. "When you get back, come into my office," the boy's father said sternly. "Okay," he answered him, and they went outside. At that moment, Ethan exhaled that it was hard to live with such an influential parent. She guessed. You have no idea how much he took her hand. And they walked forward. "Tell me something," the girl asked him. The camera in the microphone from now on was always on. "You know, we used to live a normal life. My father worked a simple job, brought a salary, but it wasn't enough for him. He had to work his way up. He was always studying, and then he started to make money. And the more money he had, the angrier he got," Ethan recalled. "And his mother, she was always quiet and did whatever his father said. When we moved into this house, something happened to her too. Now we're high society. Everyone else is an indentured servant." He stopped talking. "Maybe you haven't gotten to that point," the girl suggested. "I don't think I will." Anna turned around to walk back toward the house. Then he began to remember how he studied in a regular school, that he and his friends were walking in the yard, playing different games. At that, the guy was smiling. It was obvious that he was happy in those moments. Vika felt sorry for him, because she realized that she would have to leave him, no matter how much he didn't want to. "Will you sleep here, or can I make my own bed in the guest room?" he asked her. "If you can," she asked nicely. While she called, it was already done. A woman looked in and called out to her to show her the room. At that moment, Ethan was coming down to his father's study. "What did you want?" Sat down on the desk. "What are you doing?" Took a break from his papers and raised his head, the man. What didn't the man understand? "Where did you pick it up?" Michael wasn't saying much. "Why, you can do what you want, and I can't." The son was ready to do anything to defend Vanessa. "She's a beggar. You want to show how honorable you are." "Dad, don't say that." "What if it's true?" The man got up from his seat. "I love her." The young man turned away from the window. "What? How long have you two known each other?" 2 days. Michael opened the bar and took a bottle out of there. "A little more than that," the son answered. "Okay, I'm not gonna push you, but how do you play it? Get her out of here. Don't get married. I realize you're doing all this, not out of spite. Well, then you're only hurting yourself." He poured himself a drink of the dark liquid. "I can go now?" asked the radio. "Yes," nodded the one. The young man went back to his room. It was empty. Mentally wished Vanessa a good night, went to bed. He began to think about what they would do tomorrow morning. Besides them, there was no one else in the house. His mother had gone shopping and his father had gone to work. Ethan came to get Vanessa to call her for breakfast. "What are we going to do?" she asked him at the table. "I don't know what you want." The boy was ready to fulfill her every wish. "Do you have any books or anything interesting in the house?" she asked. "Books?" The young man was surprised. What was there to be surprised about? She couldn't understand. "Now, after breakfast, I'll show you." He began to eat. At that moment, both of them were silent for a while. When they had finished, he stood up and called Vanessa to follow him to the table. "I'm not allowed to come here while the master is away, of course, and no one else." But he put his finger to his lips. They entered her father's study, and Vanessa's breath even cleared with excitement. She hadn't realized she could get to where the information could be so quickly. "What's in here?" She played dumb and asked to show you the books too. "The library is just in the study." He showed her the high shelves. "Wow!" The girl wasn't pretending now. She was really surprised. "No one's in the house yet. We can take a look." Ethan walked over to the shelves. "Aren't you curious yourself?" She wasn't really surprised. He didn't pretend to be. "Okay, I'll pick something out quickly, and we'll go to the room." She began to look at what is here, "But I'll go to get some fresh air and see that no one comes." Out came the guy from the study. Vanessa rushed over to the computer. Sure, it was password protected, but there were a bunch of papers on the desk. She started going through them, taking pictures of some things. What she read in the 2 documents just shocked her. She realized that she hadn't set all this up for nothing. It really was a hot report. Of course, if it suddenly worked out, she said aloud and went back to the regiment. After that incident, every day when no one was home, Vanessa was able to walk into the office unhindered. She even tried to figure out the password on the computer, but she couldn't do it. She already had some information, but it wasn't enough. Let's go to dinner. They had been living here in this house for over a month. Vanessa now became Vanessa and followed the young man. They were all sitting together at the table again. Vanessa was getting used to it by now. After dinner, as on other evenings, the couple walked outside. They seemed to be holding hands and walking down the path. What did he turn to her? Wouldn't you like to live a normal life without all those parental helpers and the rest of the benefits? She asked him. What would you like to offer? Let's go to my place. Let's try living together there. Let's see how fast it goes, she said before he could interrupt her. What is there to try? Really? Vanessa didn't expect him to agree. Sure. Why not? I've been wanting to move out of here for a long time. Ethan also thought about the fact that in Vanessa's apartment, the 2 of them would be alone in her territory, and they might be able to bond. Today he didn't say anything to his parents because he knew there would be a scandal. His father never spoke to him again after that conversation they had in the study, only on business. In the morning, he packed the things he needed to take with him. They went downstairs. Where are you going? Lisa was on the first floor. Mom, I want to live on my own. See what I can make of it. As if guilty, said the young man. What do you mean you're not happy with us? The woman turned away. But why do you immediately perceive everything so? You will not live forever. He approached his mother and circled her. What will the father say to that? She's acquired him too. We'll come and tell you everything in a couple of weeks, Ethan promised. Okay, do what you want. But she fell silent and looked at Vanessa until she started asking her boyfriend what she wanted to say. Next, goodbye. The girl turned to her. They walked out of the house and drove to where Vanessa lived. This is where I live. A girl opened the door of her apartment. Are you cozy? They entered the room. Thank you, smiled the girl. She was glad to be back home. All day the young people were busy doing a little cleaning. During the time the girl was not here, things got very watered down. Vanessa asked Vanessa to the store. After everything, they needed to cook something and the refrigerator was empty. Yes, nodded Rode. He felt like he and Vanessa had a family now. Together they left the house, went grocery shopping, went back in. At home in the kitchen, they were together too. I feel so good with you, Ethan admitted. You could have gotten yourself some girl. She laughed. They sat down at the table and ate dinner. You're such a good cook, said the young man. Oh, don't exaggerate. Blushing, when the dishes were washed and the couple settled in the room in front of the TV. There was a knock at the door. Someone looked at it, a guy. Well, maybe it's the angry dad coming to get you, she joked. You think he couldn't believe it? The girl went to open the door. Miranda stood on the doorstep. Hello. Vanessa looked at her and didn't realize she could be here too. Vanessa, hi. How are you doing? She came into the apartment. I'm fine. Tried to keep her out of the hallway. Girl. Hello, neighbor. It didn't make any difference. She moved forward and saw a young man. Good evening. He turned to her. What about Liam? Miranda asked the question. Tisha gestured to her. That's where the girl started pushing the woman back towards the door. And you two broke up. Understood the neighbor. It's all in the past. I'm doing fine. So you don't have to worry about me anymore. Vanessa opened the door, showing the guest that it was time to leave. Okay. Have a nice day. She walked out onto the landing. Who was that? Asked after the woman had left the neighbor who always pokes her nose in her own business. Vanessa thought to herself that it had once played into her hands. "Who's Liam?" he asked. "By the way, is he the guy who got me where you met me?" Vanessa said sadly. And she was really sad, because she hadn't seen or called the guy in weeks. "Now I see. I'm sorry." He wanted to hug the girl, but she somehow automatically deflected. "That's okay." She realized she made the wrong gesture. "Tell me about yourself. You didn't tell me enough the other day. I want to know everything." He turned the conversation around. "You know, my life was never as sweet as yours. I had a place to go after the orphanage. This apartment was left to my parents. But the other kids didn't. A lot of them lived here for a while. And she cleaned mine up, but it was time to get the guy to talk." "Yeah," she shook her head. "Everybody gets an apartment, but some of them are still waiting for it to this day." And nothing. She glanced at Ethan, but he was staring thoughtfully in front of him. Vanessa waited for him to snap and start talking about his parents. She was now almost 100% sure that he was doing something dishonest. For example, an acquaintance of mine was supposed to get an apartment, but it didn't work out. He was offered compensation, but it was so small that he couldn't buy anything with it. "At least in this town." She kept pushing her line. "Why are you telling me all this?" The young man started to get nervous. Just complaining about life. Because some people get everything and some people get nothing. She turned up the sound on the TV and turned her back to him. "You know how mean I feel sometimes." He took the remote from her hands, turned the sound down again, and so it began. Vanessa thought to herself. She could feel the guy was about to crack. "I'm sorry." Liam moved closer to the girl, hugged her, and kissed her neck. At this point, she was only asking mentally for Liam's forgiveness. "What allows you to do this? What was it that you needed to do? What are you apologizing for?" Its life didn't turn. It turned to him. "I could tell you such things. Only Scary whispered in my ear. You killed someone." She turned to face him and made big eyes. "No, probably made it worse. Ethan was very sad to tell me." She was determined to listen. "But as I told you, my father used to be a simple administrative worker. He was doing something, always wanting more money. At one point, he was transferred to the housing policy department. So I was just an ordinary person, doing whatever I needed to do. And then it started." He stopped talking at the most interesting point. "So what started?" Interested, she looked at him, and still pretended not to understand anything. But he had been put in charge of this department. At first, no one suspected anything. My mother and I were happy when my father started earning more and bringing home an income. Then he started building a house. The boy fell silent again, looking at Vanessa as if wondering whether to continue or not. "And well, since my father knew how to do it all, he started working out different schemes. And when I finished my education, took me in." Ethan smiled as he remembered that moment. He was really enjoying himself then. "And of course, all the errands on the matter were addressed to you." As if she had guessed. "Yes, but I didn't know anything at the time. My father said that it was necessary to buy housing for people from boarding schools or orphanages. I'd go and make arrangements. It was some communal houses, old houses. At that moment I thought that since there was nothing else, at least that's how he nudged the blue ones and shook his head. It turns out that the apartments were not the ones that were actually allocated," Vanessa added. Yes, they were. I found that out after a while. My father could sell a housing that was allocated to a person and offer him compensation that was many times less than the amount he received. Since the documents were signed, most of the time young people don't read anything. And they would not be able to prove anything. And many simply did not apply anywhere. Well, they gave. What else can they do now? The girl saw that it was really hard for the guy to talk about it. And then she asked me one more question. When I told my father that I didn't want to do it, he didn't understand me. He had several companies that were registered to relatives. So he signed one over to me and put me to work there. I was kind of his assistant now. Ethan was so angry he wasn't hiding anything from her anymore. Vanessa sat back. She realized that this whole conversation was being recorded. She couldn't believe she'd done it. Don't be upset. She hugged him now. Yeah, it's okay. He rested his head on her shoulder. Why, if you were against it? You didn't go anywhere. Wasn't interesting. But it's my father. He lifted his head and looked into her eyes. More. They didn't speak on the subject that evening. Vanessa had sorted Ivan out. They went to bed. In the morning, she got up and made breakfast and called Ethan over. They ate and the girl started to pack. Where are you going? Asked the young man. I have some business to attend to. She stood already in the hallway. Maybe I asked with you. No, I'll be quick. She left the apartment and immediately called Liam. Hi. I missed you so much. He picked up right away. It's okay. I'll meet you soon, and I think I've got it all worked out, she replied. They exchanged a few words and Vanessa hung up the phone. She was on her way to the police station to talk to the investigator. The officer on duty asked for her ID, walked her to her office. Hello. She saw a solid man in uniform sitting behind a desk. Sit down, he showed her the table. Vanessa looked at the sign where the surname, first name, and patronymic of the employee were written. Rick raised her eyes to him. I have a case for you regarding the deception of children from orphanages. He sighed again. Do you have a statement too? Was he waiting for her to hand it to him or ask for paper and ask what to write? No, she shook her head. Then what? He was looking surprised now. You see, I want to become a famous journalist. She started her song again. What's that got to do with me? Look, I come from an orphanage myself. I have a lot of friends. And when I realized my friends were being cheated, I started my own investigation. So she turned on the tapes and showed him the pictures she'd taken in Michael's office. Who are you? He listened to the whole thing, and he was stunned by what this girl had done. So who is going after her target? When does it end? I think this is going to be the hot report. Vanessa smiled. So will you be able to talk to this man directly? I think so. We'll be going to their place for dinner soon. Dedicated her plans to Rick. Okay. Cell phone rings. Here's my phone number. Call me when you get this. And if he confesses to everything, then we'll take him hot, he said and handed over his business card. Thank you. Happy she went home. Ethan stayed at home like that. When the girl came in, she offered to take a little walk. She agreed. After that, a week passed. Vanessa kept wanting to talk to the young man, and which he promised to his parents, but did not know where to start. So she called her father. She asked him. No, they were at home. And that he wouldn't tell you anything, that you've been out of work for so long. She didn't know what else to say. I don't know, he shrugged. Look, do you remember when you promised your mother we'd come over for dinner? She reminded him. Yeah, it seemed like a good time to do it. You think he wasn't sure? What are we gonna tell them about our relationship? That way your daddy will see that you can live a normal life without a housekeeper. Vanessa laughed, so as not to arouse suspicion. Okay, I'll call you right now. He took the phone and went to the kitchen, and Vanessa turned all out loud. What did they tell you? She asked when he was done talking. My parents are expecting us at their place tonight. Ethan was happy with the way things were going in his life. He had no idea what was going on in Vanessa's head. That's great. She got up and walked over to her closet to pick out the outfit she would wear tonight. In the evening, the girl was ready. She called Rick, giving him a heads up on everything. He promised to have us there by the appointed time. So, shall we go? Ethan, I was waiting out front. Yeah, I'm ready. She was all ready. They were back at that beautiful house. They went in, greeted the mother and father. Come to the table, said the not-so-good-natured mother. As everyone sat down and began to eat, Michael looked at his son. He had many questions for him. So, how is life in poverty? He asked and looked out the window. Dad, why are you doing this? Ethan trespassed on the river. It's okay, she said. What's everything here for you? You said no. You don't go to work. You quit everything. The man stopped chewing. Of course, it's better to rip off this poverty than to live a private life. Vanessa put in a word. What are you choking on, Michael? What have you gotten wrong? Not a modest girl at all. How dare you talk to me like that? A man jumped up from the table. Darling, calm down. His wife tried to calm him down. Who are you in the whole world, Michael, on the girl? That one's insides shook. I am just a girl from the orphanage, who may have been just as deceived by you as many others, she said, overcoming the excitement. At that moment, the man grabbed his head and fled to his office. But not a few minutes later he came back again. Darling, go to your room. The husband turned to his wife. Why do I want to hear this? She didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't make myself clear, waiting for her to get up and leave the room. Okay, I'm leaving. Lisa was not happy. Now I'll tell you, pointing a finger at the river, to leave too. She didn't expect anyone to stand up for her, like Ethan. No, I want to know where you got all this from, what you're accusing me of. He set the table next to hers and looked her straight in the face. Why are you so nervous if you're not guilty of anything? She was still trying to suppress her inner excitement. It's not every time you find yourself in such close proximity to a powerful person. I ask you again, from where? Shouted. And why are you meeting in different diners on the outskirts of the city with young men? As it turns out later, they're all orphans. She exhibited her first trump card. I see. Maybe you already confessed to stealing from underprivileged children. She asked openly. Listen to the little kids. If I wanted to, I could wipe you out. You'd be a piece of shit. Who are you going to fight? He's got a normal smile on his face now. All right, do whatever you want to punish you. She threw a finger up. You know how hard it is to live on one paycheck. And if an opportunity like this comes up, why not take it? Who gets fostered there? Those who were abandoned. What are their genes? What I gave them is enough. You could tell the man was relaxed and was bragging about what he was doing. What makes you think that? No one refused me. The girl looked at him. These are isolated cases. That's why you have apartments, he said as if he regretted it. So, you're confessing to cheating the kids. She asked him that question again. Vanessa, why would you do that? Ethan finally spoke up. All this time, he had been sitting there thinking he had told her everything. You're good too. She turned to him. What do you want from us? Yes, I admit I did all that. But you know what people say, if you want to live, you got to keep on keeping on. That's what I was doing. Until you showed up. He stopped talking and wagged his index finger at her. She didn't understand that gesture. Oh, I'll remember you. You're the pushy girl who wanted to talk to me. Narrowed their eyes. But that was enough. The girl pressed the call button on her phone. What are you doing? Just before the man could say anything, police officers entered the house. Michael, are you under arrest? Calmly approached him Rick, and others were already handcuffing him and Ethan. How could you do that? The boy looked at her the same way you did. She got up from her chair. Lisa came out to the noise. What's going on here? I don't understand. She did. Vanessa then handed over all the photo, audio, and video recordings to Rick. It was all clear. No one would have guessed. He looked at the young girl who'd pulled it all off. Look, I'll have one favor to ask of you at the end, Vanessa asked him that he was willing to listen to. I hurt myself on purpose to get into a mental institution. Can we make sure that this tape doesn't appear anywhere? The girl asked the man. Okay, we'll figure it out. He promised her. After that, Vanessa returned home. She called Liam, told him he could come back. Hey, he was at her place in half an hour. God, how did I miss you? They hugged. So, he wanted details. The girl told him everything. She didn't even hide the fact that he had kissed her. It was obvious that the guy didn't like to hear it, but he realized it was necessary for his body. So, what are you going to do? Asked. Well, the case is going to trial, nothing. Not until after the trial's over. And this story is over. I'll be able to submit this report somewhere, she said. I'm proud of you. She's rotten. After that, Vanessa was often called in for questioning. She could only tell what she saw on it, and that was on the record. Liam, on the other hand, could say more about how he was compensated. With all this material, a few episodes were proven, but even that was enough to stand up. The trial is underway. Was Liam Vanessa present when the trial was held? Before that, Rick told the girl that Michael did everything he could to get away with it. He offered money, set up his son, because he had made those contracts, but nothing could help him, because he had confessed to everything. Vanessa would never forget the way Ethan looked at her as they were in court. She knew she'd used the guy, but he knew everything too, but he never admitted anything to anyone. Both father and son were accused of guilt. Michael got 15 years with forfeiture. Ethan as an accomplice, 9. That's it. The young men walked out of the courthouse. Yes, now with Rick's permission, I can provide materials at the studio, the girl said cheerfully. Will you take me with you? Asked Liam cheerfully. Of course, Vanessa was happy. The next day in the morning, the girl was so worried. She called the very editor she had met a few years ago at a seminar. Hello. Probably not. You don't know me otherwise. But we met at a journalism seminar. I said I wanted to be a reporter or an interviewer, and you said you wanted to be a hot reporter. Well, I've got it. She was talking, and Vanessa had a lump in her throat. He said her name, which surprised the girl. Yes, I'm surprised you remembered me. She didn't hide her surprise. I thought you were interesting then. He dictated to her the address where she could come, but everyone went. Now my fate will be decided, she said to her young man when they were where she was invited. First, Vanessa told her everything and then showed her. Well, you're a piece of work. I can't believe it. All that girl did all by herself. Thank you. Those words were better for her than any compliment. And what do you think I can do with this? She asked modestly. I'm going to make one call now. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. While the men talked, Vanessa sat silent. Her hands were in her pockets. She made her fingers crossed. Well, I congratulate you. You are being called to a very popular channel right now with this material, he told the girl. And how do I thank you? She asked. For what? For being so smart and doing all this. He handed her the flash drive. Now the couple was on their way to where they were waiting. Vanessa couldn't believe it. It was like it wasn't real. She handed over the material. She was told she'd get a call back when she'd seen it. A week later, the phone rang. Hello. She picked up after a short conversation in which Liam could see, by the look on Vanessa's face, that everything was fine. She hung up and just started bouncing around. The guy remembered the moment he'd agreed to live at her place. She had done the exact same thing. Take what? Taken. She clapped her hands together. This calls for a celebration. That's why I'm inviting you to the best restaurant. She hugged my favorite. Wait a minute. I was told that the report was already on TV. She opened the internet. When the couple found that very clip and saw her name under it, and Liam also pointed her to the comments below it, the whole town was talking about it. Everyone was shocked that a simple girl could spin such a thing. She was getting calls, inquiring and asking for help. But Vanessa just smiled. Now you are popular. I don't even know how to go out with you, a young man told her. Oh, come on. She's flirting with him. They were sitting in a restaurant. On the table were many different years. Liam took a sparkling wine, poured it into a glass. Beloved, I congratulate you. He raised the first toast. Thank you. She was happy for both herself and them. Anyway, they took a sip each, both smiling. It was obvious that the young people loved each other. Vanessa Liam got up from the table. Yes, I'm listening to you. At that moment, slow music started playing. She thought he wanted to ask her to dance. You will be my wife. Only she wanted to get up from her seat when Liam handed her the ring. My God, of course I will. She took the jewelry and kissed it. But now, I'm really happy. They went dancing. What a nice evening. Were they going home? No wrong. A wonderful evening, like him and me. So be it. It doesn't matter. She was proud of herself. When do we go to apply? Asked the young man. Now, as soon as I get a job. We'll do it right away, she said. Vanessa was eager to start working. When she first came to the collective, everyone welcomed her as if they had known you before, heard about you. You're cool, they said, colleagues, thank you. It flattered the girl. Is it true you've been taking pills? One of the young men came up to her. Yes, but it's not so simple there. She laughed. You have to be so eager to get to work. Wondered. You know, they probably would have gotten you in without that. Other people told her. All right. There was 100% of us with this material that I would pass, the girl replied. After she got used to the collective, as promised, they went with Liam to the registry office. Young people filed an application, and soon they were to have a wedding. I love you, I hugged you, and I am a young man. Thank you for always being there for me and understanding me. She kissed him. All friends and colleagues were invited to the celebration. The celebration was held in a restaurant. It was fun. Everyone congratulated, wished happiness. It made me feel so warm. I guess it's time to go home, Vanessa Liam said, when it was too late. What do you say? He couldn't refuse her. At home, the couple had already changed their clothes and got into bed. They were so tired they didn't feel like they'd never thought you were my destiny. And I always knew it. She turned back to him. In the morning, they were awakened by a knock on the door. Someone had gotten out of bed so early, young man, and went to open it. Standing on the threshold was Miranda, Liam. She stared at him. Who did you want to see? He smiled. You're doing well. Did the woman ask the question? Yes, he laughed and wondered what was going through the woman's mind right now. Saw Vanessa's report. Came to congratulate her, Miranda said. You know, we had a wedding yesterday. We're really tired. She's still asleep. Wouldn't let her roommate in the apartment. Okay, I'll come back later. She went to her apartment. Who was that? The neighbor. He told her how surprised she was to see him. They laughed together. And so Vanessa began to work. She was often sent on business trips, which the girl gladly went. All her reports were very interesting and lively. The management praised her work. Once the girl came home from work, checked the mailbox, found a letter there, put it in her pocket, and went upstairs. Liam was not there yet, so Vanessa made herself some tea. She sat down in the kitchen and printed out the envelope Ethan had written to her. Hello, dear Vanessa. I guess this is a farewell letter because it's unbearable here. I want to apologize to you for everything I've done in my life. I realize that you didn't do it because you are angry, because you are fair. I don't hold a grudge against you either. Goodbye. And you know that I've grown to love you for real kisses. 4. Vanessa heard on Liam that she wiped away a tear. Screaming, can't you hear me? I think something's happened. He came over. He looked at the sheet in his hands. Ethan wrote. She handed over the letters. Liam quickly ran his eyes over them. What does he think, that you're going to take pity on him now? He put the envelope on the table. Okay, let's not. We've forgotten. She got up from the table. Why are you crying? He wiped another tear that rolled down his cheek. It's true. It's not the kid's fault. If it wasn't for his father, he wouldn't be where he is now, the girl said. Let's forget about it. He held his wife close to him. Okay. They stood like that for a while, and then the girl went to cook. Already the next day light and hurried to work. She ran into her office, took her desk. Hi. Did you already know a coworker ran in on her? No. What happened? Did Vanessa think she missed something important? A guy in prison hanged himself. Made those big eyes. So that's what he meant by saying it was his last letter, the girl said out loud. What did he write to you? Surprised by the interlocutor. Yes, one farewell letter. He said he loved me for real. Vanessa said quietly. She took out her phone and called Liam to tell him the news.